y que cuenta con la colaboración de la Organización Mundial del Turismo, el Consejo Mundial del Viaje y del Turismo, y en la que se debatirá sobre viajes seguros y turismo post-COVID. Una cumbre que reunirá de forma telemática a más de 80 países y más de 70 CEOs de empresas nacionales e internacionales. Nos acompañan en la mesa el señor presidente del Gobierno de Canarias, don Ángel Víctor Torres, la señora ministra de Industria, Comercio y Turismo, doña Reyes Maroto Hilera, el secretario general de la Organización Mundial de Turismo, señor don Zurab Pololi Cassidy, y el vicepresidente de Desarrollo de Negocio del Consejo Mundial del Viaje y del Turismo, Mr. Greg O'Hara. Además, nos acompaña el presidente del Cabildo de La Palma, don Mariano Hernández Zapata, que intervendrá a continuación. Gracias.
Señoras, señores, como presidente del Cabildo de La Palma y en nombre de toda la corporación, quiero darles la bienvenida a esta conferencia para abordar la recuperación del turismo internacional tras la pandemia de la COVID-19, un tema que sin duda nos preocupa a todos. Me gustaría agradecer a la ministra de Industria, Comercio y Turismo del Gobierno de España, Reyes Maroto, hoy aquí presente, el haber propuesto a nuestra isla como sede para el desarrollo de este encuentro. Muchísimas gracias, ministra. Para nosotros es todo un honor poder contar con representantes del Gobierno de España, Organización Mundial del Turismo, Consejo Mundial del Viaje y el Turismo y el Gobierno de Canarias. Además, confío en que aquellos de ustedes que no han podido acompañarnos presencialmente puedan conocer un poco mejor nuestra isla gracias a esta oportunidad histórica. Sin duda, La Palma haya sido elegida para ser el escenario de este encuentro es una muestra de que el esfuerzo y la responsabilidad de las administraciones y de la sociedad ante la pandemia está dando sus frutos, dada la baja tasa epidemiológica con la que contamos. Confío en que esta conferencia sirva como foro de debate en materia de protocolos que nos permita recuperar el turismo, un sector que para La Palma, Canarias y por supuesto España es uno de los pilares fundamentales de nuestro desarrollo y de nuestra economía y una fuente indiscutible para la creación de empleo. Desde el inicio de la COVID-19 tuvimos claro que debíamos aunar esfuerzos y luchar por lograr recuperar la confianza de los turistas en nuestra isla, poniendo en marcha todos los mecanismos para garantizar a residentes y visitantes la seguridad en nuestro territorio. Por eso hemos insistido en nuestra propuesta de que la isla fuera territorio piloto para el desarrollo de pruebas a quienes venían fuera en nuestro puerto y aeropuerto y poder contar así con la mayor seguridad ante el virus. Estoy convencido de que esta conferencia nos permitirá seguir trabajando unidos en tener destinos seguros a través de establecer protocolos internacionales y que faciliten la movilidad del turista, haciéndolos más accesibles y garantizando que estos desarrollen en los propios aeropuertos. Para La Palma, el turismo es fundamental y garantizar posicionarnos a nivel internacional es esencial para dar a conocer a todos los atractivos turísticos que presentamos. En este sentido, y debido a nuestra condición de región ultraperiférica, es igualmente fundamental recuperar las conexiones con el exterior. No me gustaría acabar mi intervención sin hacer una especial mención al hecho de que la sesión de clausura esté centrada en La Palma. Es todo un orgullo ver posicionada a nuestra isla en el marco de un encuentro internacional de tal nivel y estoy convencido de que es una gran oportunidad para dar a conocer la labor que se ha desarrollado en los últimos meses para contener el virus. La Palma, también conocida como la Isla Bonita, ha cumplido 18 años como Reserva Mundial de la Biosfera en la totalidad de su territorio y es además la primera reserva Starlight declarada en el mundo, gracias a la limpieza de nuestro cielo, que no es solo un importante reclamo turístico, sino que también la convierte en un referente internacional en materia científica, siendo el Observatorio del Roque de los Muchachos una de las baterías del telescopio más completas que existen. Puedo decir orgulloso además que nuestra isla es un pequeño continente donde disfrutamos de magníficos paisajes verdes en el norte, pasando por playas de arena negra y con estampas volcánicas en el sur, sin duda un lugar que no deja indiferente a nadie cuando nos visita. Espero que esta sesión sea una oportunidad para todos nosotros y que nos permita seguir avanzando para recuperar la confianza de quienes apuestan por conocernos o volver a visitarnos y que pueda hacerlo con todas las garantías de que somos, como siempre hemos sido, un destino seguro. Bienvenidos a La Palma, welcome to La Palma, la isla bonita, great to see you here.
Muchas gracias, presidente. A continuación proyectaremos un vídeo de Gloria Guevara, presidente y consejera delegada del Consejo Mundial del Viaje y el Turismo. Adelante. Sí. Es que hay un problema. Sí. 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 Estamos solo nosotros.
El video,
Esta Gloria, sí. Pues si seguimos con... Quitamos el vídeo y seguimos... De acuerdo, pues esta planetaria Gloria, si Gloria... ¿Podemos darle la palabra a Gloria? Bueno. No hay sonido en la aplicación. Vale. Bueno, pues continuamos con la conferencia. Sí, pero no hay sonido en la aplicación.
Sí, la estamos.
Tampoco hay sonido por aquí, ¿no?
Sí, Gloria, por favor, si pudieses intervenir en directo y disculpa las molestias por no haber proyectado el vídeo. Gracias. Gloria.
Sí, lo único es que no puedo quitar el video. A ver,
No.
¿me escuchan?
perfecto.
Sí.
Te vemos
Muy
bien.
bien.
Te escuchamos.
Ministra, ¿me escuchas? Buen día.
Te
Es que
escuchamos bien, Gloria.
Te
Te estamos
escuchamos
viendo
bien.
y escuchando bien.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Yo grabé el video por si había algún problema técnico, pero ya lo veo que sí lo hubo. Primero que nada, quisiera agradecer al presidente Sánchez por su liderazgo, por el apoyo en este evento tan importante y sobre todo por ayudarnos y coordinarnos en tiempos tan complicados. Quiero agradecer a la ministra Reyes Maroto por su partnership, por ser aliada del WTTC, su liderazgo también. Muchísimas gracias, ministra, por todo lo que estás haciendo y por el apoyo al sector de viajes mundial. Quiero saludar al señor Torres, presidente de la región. Muchísimas gracias por la hospitalidad. Yo he tenido la oportunidad de viajar a La Palma en vacaciones con mi familia. Desafortunadamente hoy no los puedo acompañar porque tengo una emergencia familiar y estoy conectada desde México, pero con muchísimo gusto estoy ahí en corazón y sé que Maribel y Greg me van a representar muy bien. Saludar al secretario Pololikashvili también, a los ministros que hoy nos acompañan, a los CEOs, a Peter Greenberg, nuestro embajador. Y fue un gusto participar en la organización de este evento tan importante. Vivimos una época definitivamente sin precedente. El mayor reto es la colaboración internacional y trabajar de la mano es fundamental. Sabemos que estamos viviendo en un territorio que hay muchas cosas que no entendemos y que estamos descubriendo, pero es fundamental la coordinación internacional. Algunas organizaciones internacionales que coordinan el sector público desafortunadamente nos han fallado. Por eso es que más que nada agradezco el liderazgo de España. También agradezco la participación de todos los ministros que hoy nos acompañan y de los CEOs. El pasado 7 de octubre, Arabia Saudita hizo historia con un evento sin precedente donde invitó al sector privado y nos pidió un plan para recuperar 100 millones de empleos. Ha habido un gran avance. Este plan tiene 12 compromisos del sector público y 12 compromisos del sector privado, por lo que es fundamental trabajemos de la mano y siguiendo el liderazgo de España podamos avanzar. Déjenme ser muy clara, el liderazgo de España es reconocido por el sector privado mundial y el sector privado más que nunca está unido. I want to switch to English really brief because we have a big audience in English. I want to thank all the participants. The Minister of UK who's joining us from London, the Minister from Portugal, Argentina, Kenya, Israel. Thank you very much for joining us and all the ministers around the world. I also want to thank the CEOs that are joining us today from TUI, Radisson, Expedia, Iberia, Certares, and of course our partners from IATA that they have been very supportive during difficult times. Extraordinary situations require extraordinary leadership. And during difficult times that we are living, that's when we witness true leadership. Saudi Arabia, Ahmed Al-Khatif, made history when he helped us in the G-20 and hosted all of us. And now I want to thank Spain, who's making history again by stepping up and helping us, all of us, so that we can continue and try to resume international travel in order to bring back the millions of jobs and livelihoods that have been impacted. Today, Spain is working together, uniting all of us, the private and the public sector, and I thank them for that. On behalf of WTTC, we cannot express enough our gratitude. And if you allow me, I would like just for 2 minutes give the word to Greg O'Hara, who's there, who's my vice chair, and has an announcement to make in this trust and confidence in Spain. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm glad to be here remotely and in my heart in Palma with all of you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. A continuación, tiene la palabra Greg O'Hara, Vicepresidente de Desarrollo de Negocio del Consejo Mundial del Viaje y Turismo. Greg, please, could you take the floor?
Thank you.
It's an honor for me to be here today in La Palma in the beautiful Canary Islands. Thank you very much to Minister Reyes and the President of the Canary Islands for hosting us today, as well as a special thank you to Minister Rita Marques from Portugal for attending, who we've worked with closely in our investments there. To all of the other ministers and all the other CEOs, thank you very much for attending today. It's an important event for us to be able to communicate the different options that we have going forward, and I think you'll hear from some tremendous speakers as we go forward today. I'm Greg O'Hara. I'm the founder and managing partner of Certares. I'm also the vice chair of business development at the WTTC. Certares is the travel industry's largest investor. We have over $13 billion of assets under management. We're focused on travel, tourism, hospitality, and consumer services. It's very important these days that we in the private sector collaborate with the public sector especially now under current COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. It's more important to have global coordination than ever. What we have to be able to create is certainty for travelers so they understand what the rules and regulations that they can travel under. It's less today an issue of the traveler concern for health and welfare as it is for certainty. And so the more we can establish a global framework for certainty, the better off. And today's meeting is an example of leadership and how a country can unite ministers and private sectors from around the globe. I'd like to make a special announcement today. Minister Reyes and her team in the tourism area has provided us the leadership, confidence, and commitment in the tourism sector and created a good environment for Certares to be able to invest in Spain. To that end, we expect to deploy hundreds of millions of dollars of capital into various Spanish travel industries here in Spain, working closely with the government, and in 2021, relocate our European headquarters to Spain. And the idea behind that is we'd like to be able to bring back to the Spanish economy and the European economy many of the millions of jobs that were lost during the pandemic. Tourism is a force for good and job creation, and we want to be behind that with our dollars and our hard work. And thank you for facilitating, thank you Mr. Reyes and your team for facilitating this global platform to accelerate the global recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hara. A continuación tiene la palabra Mr. Zurab Pololikashvili, secretario general de la Organización Mundial del Turismo.
Gracias, Eduardo. Excelentísimo presidente Pedro Sánchez, querido presidente, señor Ángel Víctor Torres, querida ministra, querido presidente de Palma, Yaisa, Greg, all colleagues, ministers, ministros, voy a empezar por español. Yo me recuerdo muy bien que cuando desde el primer día hemos trabajado muy cercano con gobierno español y especialmente con ministerio, y el primer viaje fuera de Madrid que hemos hecho para reiniciar y dar un mensaje a todo el mundo fue exactamente desde Canarias, iniciado por la ministra, y fue el primer viaje después de tantas emociones y tantos días tan raras que todos hemos sufrido en esta época, y fue un primer paso para reiniciar el turismo. Es un placer estar con ustedes hoy aquí en los líderes políticos y de nuestro sector en Canarias, uno de los principales destinos turísticos europeos. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear ministers, your presence here sends a strong and clear message. The restart of tourism is urgent, and it's priority for both governments and business all around the world. In particular, I thank the government of Spain for your strong support during these challenging months. We know that the crisis that hits us this year is by no means over. However, we are at the point where we can and must look at the future. And from here, La Palma Island, where the world's widest infrared optical telescope is located, our look will certainly be detailed and clear as possible. The Global Tourist Crisis Committee, created by UNWTO at the very start of the pandemic, united our sector and guided our joint response to share challenge. And I remember, and I want to thank all of you, because many of you are still involved to work together. And our first priority was to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on jobs, on businesses, and on lives. Now the pivot of recovery and the restart of tourism. I'm happy to see so many members of our crisis committee represented here today. And I welcome those who have not yet contributed to join our next meeting to be held in Portugal next week. Rita, we will make another very important meeting, I think, with you, and thank you for your support, and see you very soon in Lisbon. The restart of tourism really cannot wait. Many millions of people, including the most vulnerable and including many here living in the Canary Islands, are waiting for tourists to return. For this to happen, we need to work together. And we also need to lead by example. That's why we meet in person when we can, and why I have resumed visits to our member states. I am pleased to say that UNWTO mission to make tourism a pillar of our recovery is gaining momentum of support all time. For the first time this year, the Secretary General of the United Nations explicitly recognized tourism as an essential tool for sustainable development. At the same time, UNWTO made sure tourism that was part of the conversation when G20 leaders meet this year. Our sector is now a regular feature of G20 plans and declarations. Never before then has tourism power been too clear or too needed. I now look forward to an inspiring conversation by the true leaders and experts this morning. Our message from the beginning was stay at home. That means to travel tomorrow. We started this campaign and it was March, just when the pandemic started. And now our next message is it's a time for travel. And we all see that to don't travel, it's not a case and it's not a solution to be more secure and more safe. It's possible to travel responsible and safe way, and I really want to announce and to tell to our friends, our all communities, that it's possible to travel, and let's make next summer different from 2020. Let's make next winter and Christmas period different from this year, which will be unfortunately very sad, but I'm sure that we united, we can make next year much successful and much easier for millions of people who are still under the risk, and these jobs and these companies need support. We always address to governments to support first to private sector, because private sector was affected mostly still is mostly affected by pandemic. So thank you very much. I want to wish a successful meeting. Thank you again, Ministra, otra vez. Muchas gracias por su liderazgo. Es otro día muy importante para el sector y no tengo ninguna duda que la declaración que vamos a firmar hoy va a ser un documento que va a ayudar a turismo, a gente que está ahí, empresas que están involucradas en turismo, para mejorar y cambiar sus vidas y vidas de millones de personas para el año que viene. Muchas gracias por invitarnos y ser una parte de ese día tan importante.
Muchas gracias, secretario general. A continuación, tendrá la palabra don Ángel Víctor Torres, presidente de del Gobierno de la Comunidad Autónoma de las Islas Canarias. Presidente, tiene usted la palabra.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to this high-level conference of tourism ministers. I am grateful to Pedro Sánchez and Reyes Maroto for choosing the Canary Islands, in particular La Palma, hold this important meeting. I would have liked all of you to be here to enjoy in person the excellent attributes of the Canary Islands. This is the location with most hours of sunlight in Europe, the only European destination that can offer sun and beach, with average temperatures of 20 degrees in winter. Buenos días a todos y a todas. Bienvenidos a esta conferencia al más alto nivel con la presencia de responsables de turismo de más de 60 países. Agradezco al presidente del Gobierno de España, Pedro Sánchez, y a la ministra de Industria, Comercio y Turismo de España, Reyes Maroto, que hayan elegido Canarias, la isla de La Palma en concreto, para la celebración de este importante encuentro. Me hubiera gustado que estuviesen todos ustedes aquí en persona disfrutando de nuestros paisajes. Esta es la comunidad de nuestro país con más parques nacionales, disfrutando de nuestra cultura y de los 1.500 kilómetros de costa repartidos por 8 islas, con playas de ensueño. Playas que se pueden disfrutar en invierno con una media de 20 grados. Me hubiera gustado que estuvieran aquí con nosotros, en el lugar de Europa con más horas de luz solar. Sin embargo, eso no ha sido posible porque estamos ante un fenómeno global que ha paralizado todo. El coronavirus ha supuesto un shock sanitario, económico y social sin precedentes. Y en lugares como Canarias, donde el turismo representa el 35% del Producto Interior Bruto, se nota aún más. Aquí el 40% del empleo depende de este sector. Afortunadamente disponemos de herramientas como los expedientes de regulación de empleo temporal activados por el Gobierno de España, que han mantenido la relación entre los trabajadores y las empresas y han hecho del colchón para evitar la destrucción de empleo. Una medida que ha sido fundamental para que no haya una quiebra social. Tenemos en Canarias una sanidad pública de primer orden, con la que se ha contenido la pandemia. Nunca hemos tenido colapso en Canarias. Contamos con infraestructuras turísticas consolidadas y un tejido empresarial fuerte y preparado. Por fortuna tenemos una población concienciada que ha cumplido de manera responsable al máximo las normas sanitarias que se han ido dictando a lo largo de estos durísimos meses. Y por ello Canarias es de las comunidades con datos más favorables con respecto a la incidencia de la pandemia. A nivel europeo también estamos entre los territorios con datos sanitarios mejores. Seguro que lo saben y quiero recordarles que este fue el primer lugar de España, de Europa, donde se detectó un caso de coronavirus. Fue en enero en la isla de La Gomera. Un viajero alemán dio positivo y se le aisló junto a sus amigos para evitar contagios. La operativa fue un éxito. De igual manera, los protocolos activados en el primer hotel de España en el que se detectó un caso de coronavirus 19 funcionó bien. Fue en febrero en la isla de Tenerife, 20 días antes de que se decretara el estado de alarma en nuestro país. Por desgracia, también fuimos pioneros en tomar una difícil decisión. Ordenamos el confinamiento de las 1.000 personas entre huéspedes y trabajadores que había en el hotel. Pensábamos que aquello podía dañar el destino turístico. Sin embargo, fue todo lo contrario. Canarias se adelantó en la puesta en marcha de protocolos anti-COVID. El trato dispensado a sus clientes durante aquella crisis fue excelente. Y muchos de esos turistas internacionales lo han agradecido, queriendo repetir y haciéndolo su visita a ese establecimiento. Lo que parecía en un principio una debilidad, sin embargo, se mostró fortaleza. Canarias, que es el principal destino turístico de invierno de Europa, además de tener un excelente clima y bellos paisajes, es un destino seguro. Lo ha sido antes, lo ha sido durante y lo va a seguir siendo después de la pandemia. Todos los esfuerzos de la Administración canaria han ido encaminados a contener los contagios. Hemos doblado la curva. Se ha hecho, creo que bien, pero nuestra dependencia del exterior y la evolución dispar de la pandemia en los mercados emisores han frenado nuestras expectativas turísticas. Esa es la razón por la que es preciso armonizar las normas y los sistemas de control internacionales. Europa ha hecho recomendaciones al respecto, pero necesitamos que se dé más certidumbre a los turistas, al destino y a las empresas que viven del turismo. Es necesario activar políticas que permitan reactivar la movilidad de forma segura y evitar la imposición de cuarentenas a los viajeros. Es vital para nuestro destino turístico, que ya está preparado para volver a recibir clientes, que se establezca un mecanismo armonizado en el control sanitario, que se autorice junto a los PCR el uso de otras pruebas antígenos cuya efectividad esté certificada por las instituciones sanitarias. Esa es la mejor manera de poder viajar siendo accesible y siendo asequible. No todos los turistas, no todos los clientes pueden asumir el precio de una PCR, que en algunos países incluso superan el precio del billete de avión a Canarias. Esperemos también que nuestros principales mercados, británico, alemán, nórdico, Países Bajos, pronto se recuperen para restablecer esa fantástica relación que hemos mantenido desde hace décadas. También queremos volver a la senda que teníamos antes de la pandemia y potenciar otros mercados emergentes, entre los que están muchos de los países aquí representados. En Canarias no nos hemos dejado llevar por el desánimo en ningún momento y no lo vamos a hacer. Quiero trasladar a todos los que hoy nos escuchan en todo el mundo, a los ministros de Turismo, a la Organización Mundial del Turismo, al Consejo Mundial de Viajes y Turismo, a todos los expertos del sector que participan en esta cumbre y a la ciudadanía, que ante este reto global debemos permanecer unidos en la lucha contra el virus. Esta crisis ha puesto de manifiesto que la humanidad hoy en día funciona como un organismo único, que por mucho mar o mucha tierra que haya de por medio, estamos entrelazados. Los canarios queremos volver a compartir con el mundo nuestra riqueza natural y bondades climáticas, pero también queremos volver a viajar, seguir conociendo sus países, aprendiendo y disfrutando de las maravillas que hay en el planeta. Sea como sea, deseamos verles pronto. Y espero que esta conferencia, estoy seguro de ello, sirva para ello. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias, presidente. A continuación y para finalizar, proyectaremos un vídeo del presidente del Gobierno de España, don Pedro Sánchez Castejón. Adelante, vídeo.
Buenos días. España es un país muy diverso en sus pueblos, su cultura, su historia, su medio físico. Y estamos impacientes por volver a ver a los viajeros de todo el mundo disfrutar de todo ello sin las restricciones que ahora mismo estamos sufriendo. Por ello, damos la máxima importancia a la conferencia que hoy se está celebrando en La Palma, que no en vano es llamada la Isla Bonita. Una isla que esconde un universo en sí misma, desde el patrimonio arquitectónico de las calles y balcones de Santa Cruz hasta la belleza inusual de la caldera de Taburiente, desde la tradición cultural del Teatro Circo de Marte hasta los innovadores telescopios que lideran la observación astronómica mundial en el Roque de los Muchachos. No se me ocurre mejor enclave que la isla de La Palma y las Islas Canarias en general para abordar un asunto tan importante que preocupa a millones de familias en todo el mundo, y es la recuperación de un sector tan importante para nuestra economía, pero también para la economía global, como es el turismo internacional. Como saben, la irrupción de la pandemia del COVID-19 ha provocado una emergencia sanitaria, económica y social sin precedentes, inédita en estos últimos 100 años de la historia de la humanidad. Una crisis que ha golpeado a todos los países, a todos los sectores, a todos los hogares, sobre todo a los más vulnerables, pero que ha provocado daños mucho más significativos en aquellas economías, ya sean las nacionales o también las familiares, que dependen de procesos de globalización como el turismo. La Organización Mundial de Turismo ha previsto una caída sin precedentes del 70% en el número de turistas internacionales para este año, para el año que ya estamos dejando, el año 2020, lo que va a suponer una pérdida de 730.000 millones de dólares. En nuestro país, en España en general y en el archipiélago canario en particular, lo estamos sufriendo en primera persona, lo sabemos en primera mano. España es la segunda potencia mundial en este ámbito, tanto por llegadas de turistas internacionales, con 83 millones de viajeros y viajeras en el año pasado, en el año 2019, como también por ingresos, 74.000 millones de dólares en el mismo año, en el 2019. Por todo ello, desde que comenzó la pandemia, el Gobierno de España ha considerado al sector turístico como prioritario, destinando más de 25.000 millones de euros a la red de protección desplegada para mantener el tejido productivo y también los empleos en el sector turístico. Ahora queremos dar un paso más, un paso que incardina con esa modernización necesaria y también con un salto de competitividad del sector turístico, con ese plan para la modernización y competitividad del sector turístico, incluido también, como saben, dentro del plan de recuperación, transformación y resiliencia en el marco del Next Generation European Union acordado el pasado mes de julio en Bruselas, y en él se completa una inversión pública de 3.400 millones de euros en los próximos 3 años, lo que va a suponer un impacto estimado en el turismo de 44.000 millones de euros. Vivimos un momento crucial, un punto de inflexión que debemos aprovechar para reflexionar sobre el turismo del futuro. ¿Cuál va a ser el futuro del turismo después de esta pandemia? para transformar, en consecuencia, la crisis en una oportunidad y sentar las bases de un nuevo modelo de turismo internacional. Y debemos además ser capaces de integrar nuevos elementos, nuevos enfoques orientados a transiciones que ya están siendo descontadas por el sector privado, como es la transición ecológica, la transición digital, y tener que hacerlo de una manera inclusiva, por ejemplo, añadiendo la cohesión social y territorial y también la perspectiva de género. De esta crisis queremos que surja un turismo más inclusivo, accesible, sostenible, un turismo que reparta mejor la riqueza que genera en las comunidades que lo acoge y que sea respetuoso con el patrimonio que nuestra generación ha recibido y debe transmitir a las generaciones siguientes. Me refiero en particular al patrimonio material y también al inmaterial. Material en forma, como saben ustedes, de espacios naturales que ustedes en La Palma pueden disfrutar, de monumentos históricos, también artísticos, y también el patrimonio inmaterial en forma de cultura local y de tradiciones de todo tipo. Todo indica que la normalidad volverá gracias a los avances médicos en forma de vacunas, tratamientos. El futuro sin COVID está cada vez más cerca. El panel de expertos de la Organización Mundial de Turismo prevé un repunte internacional en el año 2021, principalmente en el tercer trimestre, cuando se estima que una gran parte de la población mundial estará ya vacunada y, por tanto, inmunizada. Mientras ese futuro llega, sin embargo, tenemos la obligación de mitigar los efectos de esta crisis sobre un buen número de trabajadores y de empresas del sector turístico. Y para ello, la prioridad es hacer posible el reinicio de los viajes internacionales. Ahora tenemos muchas más herramientas para hacerlo de una forma segura que las que existían al principio de la pandemia. Conocemos mejor al virus, sus efectos, y contamos, por ejemplo, con pruebas diagnósticas disponibles de forma general y mucho más asequibles y también fiables. Por tanto, debemos organizarnos para utilizar estas nuevas herramientas de forma que los viajes internacionales garanticen la máxima seguridad para las comunidades que los reciben. Por eso, la agenda de esta conferencia es de la máxima importancia y de ahí que me enorgullezca que nuestro país acoja el espacio para abordar los grandes desafíos que tenemos por delante y en particular en un sector con un enorme presente pero un mayor potencial futuro que es el sector turístico. Este encuentro es una ocasión, a mi juicio, inmejorable para compartir entre todos ideas que nos permitan aprovechar la riqueza económica y social que el turismo puede generar y genera en todo el mundo y, aún más importante, la experiencia de placer, de conocimiento que a todos y todas se nos brinda a través del sector turístico. Quiero concluir recordando desde aquí a todos los viajeros y viajeras del mundo que las Islas Canarias viven ahora, en la temporada de invierno, sus mejores meses. Las 8 islas del archipiélago canario han desarrollado durante décadas un sector turístico de una enorme calidad, de un enorme atractivo para los millones de ciudadanos y ciudadanas que los visitan cada año. Por eso decimos Back to Canary Island. Es el momento de encontrar en esta tierra un espacio de seguridad, de descanso, gracias a los corredores turísticos y al esfuerzo que las administraciones públicas y en particular todo el sector, desde los trabajadores hasta las empresas, habéis desarrollado en estos meses. Os deseo a todos los mayores éxitos en esta conferencia. Sus resultados, no me cabe duda, redundarán en beneficio de millones de familias y de empresas en todo el mundo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Entramos ya dentro del panel número 1. Sí, nosotros no estamos ya en línea. Sí, lo deberíamos ver. Deberíamos verlo ahora. Ahora. Adelante, Peter. Hello, Peter. Good morning. Would you please take the floor?
I would be happy to. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Greenberg. I'm the travel editor for CBS News, speaking to you from Los Angeles this morning. And I'll be moderating both of our panels today during this conference on setting the recovery for international tourism into action. Our first panel will deal with easing international travel and mobility through global health and hygiene protocols. And I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists. From the United Kingdom, the Honorable Minister of Sport, Tourism and Heritage, Nigel Huddleston. Welcome, sir. From Portugal, the Secretary of State of Tourism, Rita Marquez. Alexander de Juniac, the General Director and the CEO of IATA. Javier Sanchez Prieto, the President and CEO of Iberia. And Friedrich Jussen, the CEO of TUI. Thank you very much for coming. I know the Minister from the United Kingdom has a scheduled conflict, so we're going to try to get through this very quickly. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to start with an opening statement, sort of a situation report on where they stand right now in the current crisis, and then we can open it up to a further discussion, which I will be prompting many of the questions. So, Mr. Minister, I turn the floor over to you.
So good morning, Peter. Nigel Huddleston here from the UK. First of all, can I say it's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. Thank you to Spain for the leadership, the Spanish government for the WTO, and of course WTTC. It's incredible the leadership that's been shown in the international cooperation. Here in the UK, like most of the world, we're desperately keen for international tourism to start. Again, we had 40 million inbound visitors in 2019. We're keen to welcome those visitors back. And of course, the love affair that we in Britain have with Spain is enduring. Nearly 18 million visitors went to Spain last year, and I am missing my Spanish holiday personally for the first time in 14 years. So I'm keen to go back to Spain, and indeed Brits are keen to start traveling abroad again. I would probably say that we're starting now with an air of optimism, though, because the vaccines have, I think, transformed the attitude and the potential for the vaccines rollout has really transformed things. And I think we can really look forward with far more confidence and plan more confidently. In the UK, of course, people will be aware we have had a travel corridor scheme operating. We're currently in our second lockdown. That is due to end soon, and we'll go back to the travel corridors. And the Prime Minister initiated a global travel task force to look at ways we could open up international travel. That has led to some other initiatives, and I'm very pleased that one of those was a new testing regime, a test to release regime that will be introduced soon. We're also in the midst of starting our aviation recovery plan, our tourism recovery plan, and looking at non-testing regimes as well that we can use to make sure that we can take advantage of global travel, both inbound and outbound, as soon as we're able to do so. So very difficult times for the British tourism industry, as it is around the world. But I will say that we're feeling far more confident about the recovery of domestic and international travel now than we were a few weeks ago. And thanks to the huge effort that the travel industry have gone to make sure that travellers can feel safe with all the measures they've put in place, the hygiene measures and everything else, so that when we are able to travel again, people can travel with confidence. Thank you.
Nigel, while I have you, and before we get to our other panelists, you mentioned the new quarantine program, the test to release, going from, let's say, 14 days down to 5. But the real question I guess I have to ask you and to all of our panelists, and we'll get to that, is according to the WTTC, by the end of this year, 174 million jobs could be at risk unless we quickly change course and get back on a much more creative path. But how do you do that when every country seems to have its own set of rules, its own set of disciplines, which change, as you've already experienced in the United Kingdom, quite rapidly?
Well, it's a very good question. And I will say that actually, thanks to the leadership of WTTC and others and the private-public sector partnership that's taken place, we are all learning from each other. We're all taking very close account of what's going on in the rest of the world and looking at best practices. And certainly, we're constantly reviewing our regimes, constantly reviewing the international status. I think, based on medical advice, we do have concerns in the UK, particularly about the incubation period, which is why we've still got this 5-day period between having the test and therefore not enabling people to come out of isolation immediately. I know some other countries are adopting different policies, but that is based on the medical advice we're getting. And I don't think it's a great surprise that different countries are adopting different policies based on slightly different advice. But I would say the intent is to cooperate as much as possible globally, and the WTTC, UNWTO, G20 and other bodies are helping facilitate that. And we're open to ideas, we're open to looking at what's happening internationally, because we do want to make it as easy and smooth as possible. But of course, we are still dealing with a deadly pandemic and therefore have to take the medical advice we're all getting in our individual countries very seriously indeed.
Nigel, thanks, and I'll kind of come back to you on a few more things after this. Let's turn it over to Rita Marquez.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Hello, Peter. Hello, everyone. Let me start greeting Spain for this very important initiative. Dear Minister Reis Maroto, thank you so much for inviting me, for inviting Portugal. We've been strong partners across the years, so let's stick together and let's respond in a very harmonized way, articulated way in these complex times we are living in. Let me also greet the president of the autonomous region of Canary Islands. It's really a pleasure to be in this event, although off-site. I would love to be in the Canary Islands for sure. And also let me greet very warmly the president of WTC, dear friend Gloria, and also the Secretary General of the UNWTO, dear Zorab. It's also very nice to meet you again. And of course, let me greet everyone, all the ministers, all the CEOs, all the companies, all the ones that are at their homes. Hope I can find you safely. My first thoughts, about the present situation. I think that governments and companies have the obligation to learn from the mistakes, and we made a lot of mistakes during the first wave. And so I understand that there's a great short-term challenge to which we must be able to respond. Once and for all, we need to coordinate efforts to harmonize criteria and measures to reduce travel restrictions and promote mobility on safely and a sustainable way. And basically, this is the only way we have to restore people's confidence in traveling and allow companies to plan for the short and medium term as far as their businesses are concerned. Here in Portugal, we have been applying this 5T strategy: test, trace, track, train people, and travel. And that's pretty much the plan. So the roadmap is quite clear. The challenge here, as it has been said before, is to guarantee that everyone knows this plan, all the governments know this plan, and stick to it. On January 1st, 2021, Portugal will assume the presidency of the European Council, and Portugal has the responsibility to dedicate all its effort and commitment to bring to life this roadmap, to guarantee that we have a path that is already being taken, of course, but we have to share in a deeply way information, knowledge, experiences, creating a test bed of countries that can really make a difference as far as reset of tourism is concerned.
Thank you, Rita. We'll be back to you in a little bit. Let me turn the floor over to Alexander Dejuniak, the Director General and CEO of IATA.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Switzerland, Geneva. May I extend my thanks to the Spanish government and the WTTC for organizing this very important event and for their leadership to support the safe restart of travel and tourism. I will focus my remark on aviation. IATA represents 290 airlines that provide 82% of global connectivity. And we held our annual general meeting last week. And for the first time in history, this meeting was held virtually. That reflects the catastrophic impact of the COVID-19 crisis has had on connectivity. It is the greatest deconnecting of the world since the Second World War. Their top concerns mirror the key topics of this panel. First one, rebuilding confidence with health protocols to keep travelers safe and restarting the industry using testing to open borders and waiting for a vaccine. There was a further concern that is not on this agenda, but I will mention it so that we are all aware. Airlines will lose a staggering $120 billion this year, and they will lose a further $40 billion in 2021. And that is with a $133 billion of critically needed financial support from governments. Debt has increased by over 50% to $650 billion. And to get through this crisis, airlines, but also other part of industry, aircraft manufacturers, airports, ANSPs, ground handlers, all our industry partners will need continuing support from governments to survive as viable entities. With that background, I'm sure that you can appreciate that we need to restart the aviation industry quickly. Sanitary protocols for safe flying are agreed through the leadership of the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. We have comprehensive, multi-layered guidance to keep travelers safe in the traveling process. These protocols need to be implemented. Many governments have, but not all. So a first priority is universal implementation of the ICAO guidance by all governments. The next priority is reopening borders. And while there is a lot of excitement about vaccines, they are many months away from being a solution. And the world needs to get reconnected much sooner than that. Otherwise, no economic recovery, no strong comeback to the previous situation in terms of economic dynamism. The airline industry is united with the travel sector in promoting the immediate implementation of testing regime to give government the confidence to reopen borders to travel. Our members passed unanimously a resolution calling on government to use testing to facilitate travel without quarantine. I cannot emphasize more, without quarantine enough. Over 80% of travelers have told us that they will not travel while quarantine measures are in place. And the catastrophic 90% fall in international travels confirm this. But we are ready with fast, affordable, accurate, and scalable tests that can do the job. In fact, ICAO, with the support of public health authorities, including World Health Organization, WHO, and the industry, have produced a manual for governments detailing for testing options, and IATA has published an implementation guide to simplify a speed-up adoption. In IATA, over 80%, in IATA surveys, over 80% of travelers have said that they are willing to be tested to travel. And we have gone a step further with development of a travel pass, IATA Travel Pass, to manage test verifications so that governments can confidently recognize tests conducted in other jurisdictions, and it will be extended to vaccine. So I close my comments with a message of hope. The building blocks to reopen travel are in place. If we work together, we can reconnect the world. But we must move beyond the risk elimination goal that is driving quarantine requirements. We must accept to mitigate COVID-19 risk with testing that will enable us to restart aviation, power tourism, and propel an economic recovery. And we must do it fast. The lives and livelihoods of millions of people are counting on us. And when I say millions, in tens of millions. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for inviting IATA to participate into this panel.
Alexander, thank you so much. You've given me so many questions to follow up on. So stay with me for a second, because let's go to one of our other members, Javier Sanchez Prieto, the President and CEO of Iberia.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you. Buenos días a todos. Primero de todo, simplemente dar las gracias al Gobierno de España y agradecer la presencia del presidente Pedro Sánchez hoy, a la ministra Reyes Maroto por su organización, a Ángel Víctor Torres por organizar esto en Canarias, que como todos habéis dicho es un sitio maravilloso, y por supuesto el apoyo and of course the support and the collaboration of the WTTC and the UNWTO. Well, to start with, my first ideas to share is that we all know that we need to follow the health protocols in this crisis, because the main aim of the industry is to generate confidence. I'm speaking here more from the airline industry point of view. So we need to generate confidence in travel, and to do so, I personally believe that there are two things that we need to do. We need a coordinated approach. I cannot stress this enough. I mean, it's not about having a perfect protocol for each country or each region. It's to have a protocol for everybody. The current situation of different and continuous changes in protocols and rules only create unnecessary burden and uncertainty on customers. So I don't think it's possible to actually recuperate confidence of our customers without this coordinated approach. The second thing is, based on scientific evidence and information, in the current epidemiological situation, where COVID is established in the community, imported cases account just for a very small portion of all detected cases, and are likely to significantly increase the rate of transmission. So travelers should not be considered as a high-risk population. They should be considered in the same way as local residents. So to that point, we urge governments to implement, again, common protocols based on quick, affordable, and reliable testing. And I think the antigen testing is the right one, to remove all the other travel restrictions. To Alexander's point, we cannot understand, and it is difficult to understand for customers, that if you're flying from Toulouse to Barcelona, you need to present a PCR test. But if you're going by car or by train, you don't need to do so. It's simply not understandable. It's that if you want to travel from Spain to Paris and back and the following day, to do a PCR, you actually need to do the PCR here in Spain. So we need to create that. I mean, unfortunately, the coronavirus, we can say it's an act of God, but it is our responsibility to create this coordinated approach. And the airline, I have to say that we have very quickly and effectively adopted the protocols. We all know that safety is in our DNA, and it's been proved that the level of contagion while traveling on a plane is not significant. IATA has run, not only IATA, but many other institutions has run different research, and this has been proved. So we are ready to continue working with governments, with institutions, to develop a database protocol as soon as possible. And I think that working together, is the only way to actually try to recover confidence of our customers, and that's what I would like to add at this starting point. We can continue the discussion later.
Javier, thank you so much. More questions for you, of course, when we come back. And Friedrich just didn't hear us because he was having some audio difficulties. Friedrich, are you there?
Peter, can you hear me now? Or?
Yes, we can hear you now. There you are, Friedrich.
That's very good.
CEO.
Thank you very much.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Peter. Excellencies and ministers, thank you very much for having me on this prominent panel. We actually have faced an unprecedented crisis, and you can see it in the activities of our company, TUI, where we bring customers from the north of Europe mainly to the south of Europe. We actually had just in January and February the strongest booking months of company history, with revenues up around 20%. And then actually, the travel stopped on the 16th of March with closing of all borders, and revenue was coming down year over year in the quarter starting April and ending June, 98%. And then we started some travel again, and in the meantime, we have brought 2.1 million customers abroad, many of them to Spain and many of them to the Canaries. Right now we are in winter season, and Canaries are, of course, the most important winter season of North Europeans, and this is true for Germans, for English, and as well as for Benelux and the Nordic countries as well. Now, you can say that travel, despite all the virus incidents, is safe, and we just take our numbers. Of the 2.1 million customers, only 163 cases were measured, many of them when they actually entered the countries. So health protocols are implemented and they are effective. And I think this is a very important message. And I think that's something which also generated in many of our countries of origin the attitude that actually health and healthy and safe and pleasure holidays are possible. Actually, in the winter season, as I said, Canaries are the most important destination for North Europeans, and therefore I'm very happy to sit on this panel. And I also have to say that, for at least part of the countries, travel is possible. And just in winter seasons, we brought hundreds of thousands of customers from Germany to the Canaries already. We are flying with more than 35 flights per week. And the protocols are in place. I think the important message right now is that we test instead of quarantine, and that was made before as well. And when we talk about test, we are very reliant and also convinced that antigen rapid tests are the right methods to go. First of all, they are safe. They are in the accuracy right now between 98 and 99%, so not much below PCR. They are more cost efficient, and they are actually immediately available at departure, which is equally important because the latency also introduces inaccuracy as well. So if I can say, the plea to actually politicians, to organizations, but also to companies, take seriously the safety of customers. I think this is without any alternative. At the same time, open corridors with safe and rapid tests, I think is the second one. And then I personally believe, good travel, safe travel, and good leisure holidays are possible already this winter. Thank you very much for having me, on the panel again, and I'm available for your questions.
Friedrich, thank you so much. If I could give a takeaway to the opening statements, I think I hear two things. One is we want to leave this panel immediately and go to the Canary Islands, and the second is going back to what Javier said. We need a coordinated effort, a private-public collaboration, and towards that end, I want to go back to what Alexander said and also ask this to Minister Huddleston. It's the Q word, quarantine. It's the T word, testing. in terms of scalable solutions. My reporting tends to confirm what Alexander Dujuniak is saying in terms of when we're going to get a scalable solution in terms of vaccines. And perhaps we may see it in the form of rapid response, reliable testing at every touch point of your journey that takes the place perhaps of a quarantine. So Minister Huddleston, here you are going from a 14-day quarantine to a new regime that allows you to quarantine out in 5 days. But that, according to IATA and all the other airlines I'm talking to, isn't sufficient. So is this just an interim step for you?
Well, we're confident that with a 5-day period that will protect the domestic people from international travel, because after 5 days we can be confident that a negative result is indeed a negative result. The problem is, as I mentioned earlier, any earlier than that, then there is a risk that actually we don't appropriately capture it because of the incubation period of the virus. Now, having said that, obviously the testing regime is constantly improving. I agree with the other panelists that until we've got the vaccination rolled out completely, we have to consider the test and trace systems, both domestically and for internationally. But at the moment, we're comfortable with it. But also, as I said, and this is the same on behalf of the Department of Transport, who I work with very closely. Of course, they are looking at all options. And as the testing regimes improve and we see what's happening internationally, we're open to changes, but we're confident that what we're proposing at the moment will provide the protection that we're looking for.
And are you satisfied right now with your level and efficiency of contact tracing?
Well, there's always room for improvement, but in the UK, you've probably seen we've gone from just 2,000 tests a day to 500,000 tests a day capability, which is more than anywhere else in Europe. But we needed to massively increase that, and we're seeing successes with the test and trace mechanism, particularly as we opened it up, for example, regionally in Liverpool. We saw significant improvements. So I think that we've all learned lessons across the globe in terms of improvements in test and trace, combined then with apps and other systems. Actually, we're all making improvements, but things seem to be working pretty well at the moment.
In terms of airports and airlines, and I throw this open to both Javier and Alexander, we're seeing airlines and airports taking the lead in different regions of the world in terms of that testing. You're seeing Delta Airlines announcing that they're going to do a quarantine-free flight to Rome. You're seeing other airlines and airports saying we're going to provide testing before you get on the plane that will satisfy your incoming destination requirements. But it's not widespread yet. Everybody is acting on their own. I go back to, here I am in the United States of America. We're anything but united. We're the 50 fractured states of America. So to Alexandra and Javier, what can you guys do in terms of your position with all the airlines, well, Javier, your airline especially, but Alexandra, with all the airlines you represent, to come up with something that's unilaterally recognized? I go back to the days of the old carte jaune. We all may remember that, the yellow health card that was then recognized by the World Health Organization that showed I was properly vaccinated against, malaria or typhoid or tetanus, et cetera. Where are we going to go to get one pass? Is there one ID that the world can then embrace that can speed the process of testing and vaccination when it does arrive? Alexandra and Javier?
Thank you for the question. You're right to mention that one of the key issues that we have to face is sorry to be a bit blunt, but a complete lack of coordination among states, countries, government in terms of their what they impose in terms of protective testing or tracing measures for the entry of anybody through their borders. That's a real difficulty. So what we have done is we have tried to implement experiments. So to have testing processes done in Toronto, in Rome, in Frankfurt, in Heathrow, in Asia, at least to propose something that works and to collect data about, the feasibility, the accuracy, the efficiency of the system we are proposing, and we are providing these data to border control authorities, to health organizations, to civil aviation, just to consolidate the proposal we are making, which is the following. systematic testing for passenger, systematic testing using new tests. Secondly, an app that will be a certification process to explain to governments which need this type of certification that the test and potentially in the future the vaccine has been properly done with right results, etc., etc. So that is what we call the IATA travel pass, in which we will have a complete management of the data from the lab or the test vaccination or the test center or the vaccination center to the passenger, then to the airline, then to the government, then back to the passenger. So that's an important tool to have a complete and reliable system that government needs. But the last point I would like to make is the following. We fully understand that governments want to protect their population from, the reimportation of the virus. That is normal. But on the other hand, what we say is that we must be aware that we will live with the virus. And the vaccine will not change the point. What it will change is that the virus will be kept under control. So what we say when we propose testing, and in the future, testing plus vaccination, is that is the right way of opening borders, restarting travel, and maintaining the pandemic under a very strict control, and that will not represent any threat. And so we will live with the virus as we live with measles, with flu, with AIDS, and for these disease, we do not close borders. But we ensure that the danger is maintained under control and the risk is maintained under control. So that's the essence of our proposal.
So it's a proposal, Alexander, but the question is, who is leading? Who is going to be making that decision?
Three things. We have with our partners, we have taken the lead to make that proposal. Secondly, we have convinced ICAO and WHO to issue recommendations that have been issued 3 weeks ago, and that will have to be implemented by each state because it's a sovereign decision. But we urge states to do it. So we say to states, please implement this recommendation. They have been worked out very well, very carefully. And thirdly, we are working with 21 governments, including the UK government, for instance, to convince them to implement this type of system. So we are in a kind of strong promotion conviction, and we are relying on the help of some governments. Some of them are moving in the right direction, and I'm sure that the governments who are represented there, the Portugal, Spain, UK, will do the same.
So Nigel, are you convinced?
Well, as I said, we're looking all the time at what's happening internationally, and the Department for Transport, as well as my department, are always open to new ideas. But I say we've got to put the protection of the population here first and foremost. And I say we're comfortable with the 5-day proposal at the moment, but we'll see where things go. We certainly want and wish to cooperate internationally, and I completely concur with all the comments that the more international cooperation, the better. It also helps reduce confusion to international travellers. We understand that, but at the same time, I think everybody does respect that it's up for domestic governments to decide what they wish to do in their own country based on the medical advice that they get as well. But we can all learn from each other, and we're very keen to see how testing regimes and other regimes work around the world.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but based on the medical advice that you're getting, are you convinced about Alexander's suggestion?
Well, I think we need to see the evidence as things evolve. At the moment, I say we'll be conducting, when we open up again from the 2nd of December, we come out of this lockdown, the 5-day regime. And of course, we need to see evidence of what works. I think we all hope and wish that many things work, that we could speed up, but we need the evidence to prove that they do. And I have to say, as I said in my opening comments, a huge amount of effort has gone into ensure the safety of international travellers and the tourism markets around the world, hotels, hospitality, everything. Everybody's doing everything they can. but we need to not just hope that we've got safety, but we really do need the evidence as well. And as time goes on, the evidence is coming, and we're open to all of the ideas and proposals.
Rita, you know the question's coming to you. What do you think of Alexander's suggestion?
I absolutely agree with it. In fact, since the very first moment, Portugal has been one of the leaders considering that quarantine does not help, especially in the tourism industry, but not also only in the tourism industry, for business, for instance. So it doesn't help. So we, from the first moment, have considered three main priorities. First, not to have quarantine. Second, to test at the origin as much as possible. And third, to allow free mobility within Schengen area. And that was pretty much the position that Portugal assumed since March. And that's why I've said, I hope during our presidency, we might have a new window of opportunity to bring or to drag along other governments in order to consider at least a test bed or a couple of countries that are willing to stick to what Yata just mentioned, so no quarantine, resume traveling, follow all the protocols, the health protocols, test at the origin, and to instigate trust. I think, as it has been said before, it's very, very important to have to instigate trust, to have robust testing strategies, to have sufficient testing capacities. So these are aspects absolutely crucial to resume traveling. And again, we might not be all aligned, but I guess that some of the European countries will be aligned. So for those, let's try to work together and to have a kind of testing infrastructures, testing protocol, testing framework that will allow us to reset tourism.
In your opening remarks, Rita, you said that mistakes were made during the first wave. I think everybody can say that. You have no monopoly on that. But what was the most important lesson that you learned from those mistakes that you're applying now?
I think one of the major aspects that we really need to value is that public and private partnerships are really important. Of course, the government can have all the advising from the health authorities, all the advice from the health authorities and so on. But it's very important to bring to this game also the private sector, listening to what they have to tell us. And I think if we follow that trend, we will be in a better position than the one that we had a couple of months ago. And so I'm very glad to have in this panel some of the key stakeholders from the aviation industry, for instance, because as you said in the very beginning, Peter, we do have airports, we do have carriers that, are leading the way. So, and with the willingness of the governments, with all the willingness of the private companies, I think, as I said before, we would be in a better position that we were a couple of months ago. So I would take, this major topic to be one of the most important ones to consider in the future.
I noticed, for example, that TAP is resuming more flights to the United States. Very happy to see that. But I go to Javier for this, and that is, and it goes back to what Alexander was saying about connectivity. We've now lost, by my accounting, about 34 different airlines, not that are operating in bankruptcy, that have literally gone out of business. We've seen from Minister Huddleston, I can tell you that this about connectivity, that Heathrow was the most connected airport in the world. It's now dropped from that. So has New York, by the way. And the two most connected airports in the world right now are Shanghai and Beijing, which is somewhat ironic because that's where the virus sort of started. They were able to close down first and they opened first. So Javier, my question to you is, it's about messaging, and trust. As we work our way through all this in terms of the hope of the vaccine or the reliability and implementation of widespread testing, what is the messaging you're giving your passengers to reinstate some of that trust when they see all around them the economic devastation that this has caused?
Well, I think that the first and foremost, I will refer to the first message of our conversation. I mean, again, how do I need to reassure our customers that in most of the countries, when the virus has been introduced to the community, imported cases are likely to contribute very little. And now with the testing protocols, air travelers should be considered a selected and mostly non-symptomatic subpopulation with a low probability of being infected. So comparable to the general population of the country of either or both origin and destination, this is a subset. I mean, you're most likely to be infected, I'm afraid, by our family than by an air traveler after passing that test. So that's why I asked for any other restrictions. And coming back to the question, because I think that connectivity is key, and we all know that. This has to do also with the tests and protocols. Now, I mean, you can travel to the European Union from some countries in Latin America. Depending on the reason why you're traveling, how can this be something related to the health? So if you have a test, a negative test, you can visit Spain from Colombia. If you are a resident in Spain, or if you are traveling for business. But if you are traveling for tourism, you are not allowed. Does it make any sense? When you have a negative test, you have a negative test, you are in relative terms, you're better than the majority of the population of Spain, because you have been tested negative 70 hours ago. So I think that we need to restore connectivity, and we're trying to actually do that. We're making an investment in flying, flying to Latin America, basically connecting Europe and connecting the regions of Spain to do so. But it is very difficult because there are just simply too many restrictions. And many of those restrictions are not based on health, are based on an uncoordinated approach to the protocols. And I think that it's time to act. It's time to establish common protocols based on the evidences that we have today. And what we have today is that, again, testing people who has tested negative is just less than 1% of the cases on the countries. It's not moving the needle.
But then again, it's the kind of test that will be recognized on an international level.
Well, absolutely. But you know what? Well, I'm not an expert. We are not expert in testing. But if you're flying to Europe, you're flying to Spain from a country, you need a PCR. Okay, fine. But if you arrive to Barajas and you don't have a PCR, then we provide you with an antigen. So should I be assuming that an antigen is good enough? My answer would be yes. I mean, again, I'm not an expert, but the Canary Islands are a good example. We have one of the lowest, or if not the lowest, in the European regions, and we've been testing with antigen. The president of el presidente de la comunidad said that before. I mean, we understand that we need to make a lot of trade-offs here. But if you put in the scales, okay, the affordability of the test, how quickly can you actually do that? As Johan was saying, that is in favor of accuracy and efficiency. I think that an antigen test is the best tool that we have available today, all things considered.
You know, it's interesting. I was speaking to you today from Los Angeles, where we are currently in a lockdown, where there's no indoor or outdoor dining, where there's a 10 p.m. curfew. And yet I will leave later today, go out to LAX and fly unrestricted to Mexico. And when I land in Mexico, there won't be any testing. They will ask me if I have any symptoms. And of course you have to be responsible and wear a mask, but that's it. So my airline experience will not be impeded in any way. And yet my living experience in wherever I'm going could be. There seems to be a lack of logic and application of common sense here. Who wants to take that one? Don't all jump in at once.
No, I agree, Peter. I mean, this is the point, because, you know, I think there is a moving target, right? We are talking about PCR, which has been the gold standard. You know, I think we did now, you know, then antigen became better and better. And some of the countries and governments have recognized this. Also, the immediate availability of the test results, so latency 10 minutes. I mean, this is an enormous advantage. And sometimes, as Javier said, you are requested to have a PCR test, but when you come in the country, you have to do an antigen test if you don't bring a PCR test. So what logic is behind it? At the end of the day, I believe, you know, we need to open the corridors. We cannot lock down countries. And of course, you need to have, you know, as much as possible, a full screening of travelers. And that is something, you know, which I fundamentally believe in. We do that with the Canaries right now. So everybody who enters the country has actually an antigen test. And here my view is, if you do that, the mobility cross-border is much better organized than the mobility if you move into a subway in Los Angeles or New York. And therefore, you know, I think, you know, penalizing international traveler is definitely something which long-term is not a solution. And maybe one last point I want to make, and that is particular for Europe and maybe for the leisure travel industry in general. I mean, when you look at the amount of harm you do in the destinations, because actually the money is not arriving and the tourists are not arriving, I mean, the collateral damages you have in these countries, where GDP of tourism is very often close to 20%, and if you take the summer, it's maybe 30% if you account for the season. I mean, locking down borders cannot be a solution. And here my view is testing will be for quite a foreseeable while the right thing, and of course vaccination long term as well.
Well, then, you know what, Frederick, there's also the reality of the optics of vaccines, the trust factor here. My guess is that when they become available, at least I can give you the American view here, 1/3 of the American public won't trust it.
Yes.
The other third will be standing around to see if the first third dies. And the last third might be on a conference call with some conspiracy theory. And the future might actually be, as Alexander says, in widespread, rapid response, reliable testing at a biometric level could be implemented at every touch point of your journey, whether you're going to the movie theater or the grocery store or getting on a cruise, and we'll get used to it like we take our shoes off at the airport during security checks. Maybe that will actually happen before the widespread implementation or acceptance of a vaccine.
Yeah, I agree. Peter, that's a long discussion we are having also in Germany. Germans are usually very suspicious when new things come, so not the most innovation hungry, if you like. But I think, you know, at least in the politics, who I talk to in Germany, it's not that people say, you need the vaccines is actually taking a significant role when you vaccinate everybody. But if you could vaccinate the most vulnerable, if you could vaccinate the people who are in medical service and so on and so on, yeah, so these important people, you know, then you don't eliminate the virus, but you eliminate the health system, so the breakdown of the health system, which is, I think, the right objective. Eliminating the virus will take a long time, but eliminating the overloading of health infrastructures, yeah, is something, at least in Germany, and I would say potentially in the UK and other Northern European countries, is definitely seen as the main objective of vaccination, at least initially.
While I've got you, Friedrich, of course, I would be remiss if not discussing one of your divisions, which is cruises. Sure. And in the United States, we had the no-sail ban, the no-sail order from the Centers for Disease Control, which, even though it was lifted at the end of October, the CDC has still issued an advisory to travelers not to take cruises. There, at least every single U.S. cruise line that I know has delayed their resumption of cruising through maybe February or March of next year. But in Europe, that's not been the case. You've been doing cruises since July. 100,000 passengers have sailed without any major incidents. So what has been your experience in terms of the testing that you're doing? Because the word quarantine on a cruise ship is not a pleasant thought. So what is the experience that you have with your testing and protocols that you've implemented that can also set the standard for what's going to be happening, hopefully, in the next 4 or 5 months around the world?
Actually, Peter, we have taken 50,000 guests, more than 50,000 guests right now on a cruise ship since July. And we had 0 incidents, 0, not a single incident. Of course, there are health protocols. First, you need to bring the most latest test, and by the way, it's antigen, right? So, because we believe antigen, because of low latency, you can do, 24 hours before you leave, and, PCR is much more difficult. So antigen is the right thing to do. Second, we only cruise with half occupancy. So in our cruise ships, only we put half the guest of the theoretical capacity. And then, of course, the cruises has actually changed. For example, initially, we just did the blue cruises, so we didn't disembark and embark all the time. And that worked well. It worked well, because if you go to the Nordic fjords, that was in the summer, you don't want to see the holes, the wooden houses at the end of a fjord. You want to see the Seven Sisters and the beautiful landscapes. And midnight sun and the glaciers, right? So and now, of course, we, as we speak and we do the conference in the Canaries, we have, of course, very good protocols of embark and disembark processes in the Canaries. And, we do, cruises there as well. So I think, as we have experiences, more than 50,000 guests without any incident, it seems to be working, and therefore, my view would be, it is obviously a product, and people, which is possible, and people like it. When we look at customer feedback, when you look at demand, we just have launched a cruise across the Atlantic. So you go 10 days Atlantic, 10 days on a private island of our sister company, Royal Caribbean, 10 days back. And it was sold out within 24 hours. I mean, I think the demand is enormous. The demand for leisure travel and tourism is enormous. We just need to make it possible.
Well, can you make it financially sustainable to sail at only 50% capacity?
Liquidity-wise, yes. Of course, profits are not possible, but on the liquidity, of course, it's liquidity neutral. Of course, it's not profitable, and that's my point. All tourism companies today, being it, I think airlines, being it hotels, also our airlines, also our hotels, we manage for liquidity. Because at the end of the day, the liquidity squeeze is the dangerous thing today, and of course for profitability and positive profits, you need load factors of, let's say, 60 or 70%, but liquidity is not is already 50% or 30, 40%, most of the time is good.
Speaking of load factors, Rita, it wasn't only 9 months ago the topic of discussion was over-tourism. How are we going to manage all the numbers? Now the world has been given an opportunity for a reset, a do-over through no intended consequence, an unintended consequence. So when you talk about the travel bubble, when you talk about opening up corridors, how are you going to manage that from a health perspective? And as we were just talking to Friedrich, how are you going to manage that from a profitability standpoint?
Oh, that's a very, very hard question, but very legitimate one. So it's very, this is the right timing to think about it. We know that people, when they will resume traveling, they will have a greater concern about personal well-being. The quality and humans' impact on the environment will be really important. There will be a strong preference for travel domestically to neighboring countries, perhaps. There will be a desire to avoid high-density accommodation and activities, and so on and so forth. So we know about these trends. We are studying these trends, and all the governments must react promptly in order to guarantee that this desire of consumers to be seen as a safe and responsible travels have an echo within public policies. And so here in Portugal, so we have been working on this framework, sustainability framework for tourism since 2016. So when we outlined our strategy for tourism 4 years ago, we considered to sustainability as one of our pillars. So the question is how we move from words to action. Well, a lot needs to be done. First, we need to prioritize stimulus measures around certain sustainable tourism criteria. So basically what I'm saying is that, for instance, financial instruments should be prioritizing investments in sustainable tourism projects, for instance. So we need to spend more resources on sustainable areas than traditional activities such as promotion and so on and so forth. So, and I do believe that all the governments are moving the right direction. Of course, data will help us a lot on this. So we know that, IT and data will allow us to control and to monitor the flow of tourism in a city, for instance. And we have to work with all the private stakeholders, public stakeholders, in order to engage them in this more environmentally friendly ecosystem. And this is the point where we need to act, really. And I guess that Portugal can also lead the way in this topic.
And of course, it brings up the whole issue of traveler behavior in general. I'm speaking to you, as I said, in California. We just went through the Thanksgiving holiday period in the United States, which traditionally is the busiest travel 4-day period of the year. This year, it was the busiest travel holiday of the year, but certainly nowhere near the numbers of last year. But still, the TSA reported screening nearly 1 million people every day for 4 days. And when you dig down deep into the reasons why people were traveling, it might surprise you to learn they were not traveling to go see their relatives, because they were worried about that from an epidemiological perspective. But the reason why they were traveling as entire families, they just wanted to travel anywhere. They just wanted to get out of town. The problem is, where were the protocols in terms of the health authorities for testing or for follow-up or for contact tracing? And the answer is, in almost every case, they weren't there. So everybody's now even more worried about people coming back from places where there was no testing. I guess the question then becomes, we know the demand is there. Friedrich talks about it. Royal Caribbean just asked for volunteers to take a test cruise, and overnight they had 100,000 people sign up. I mean, it was crazy. So there's no issue about demand. The real question, of course, then becomes when we go beyond testing, and this is for Javier and for Alexandra, it's about airlift. When we see the devastating toll that is taken not just on airlines, but on just airlift and connectivity in general, how do you build back from that to be able to get people to go to Portugal, to be able to get people to go to the Canary Islands or anywhere else when you have, airlines are not just parking airplanes, they're retiring them. Javier, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that, first of all, I agree with the view of Frederick about we airlines now are managing our connectivity and our flights, our schedule, thinking more on liquidity rather than profit. So, and in that regard, I had to say that, as you can imagine, the losses of the industry, and Alexander can elaborate on that, are going to be enormous. Having said that, what I think is there is, as was referred before, there is untapped demand, as Frederick says. I remember when the corridor between the Canaries and the UK was open. That same afternoon, the searches in our webpage multiplied by 5. So people want to travel. It is difficult because we need to combine this with the health crisis. But again, with what we know today, I think that we should be able to actually facilitate those passengers to travel. And I don't think it will generate, let me put it that way, I think that demand will be unlocked as soon as we put in place the corridors and we put in place the rules. Might be will be a bit more controversial to think about how these kind of things that we're doing now, using Zoom and stuff, could influence the more business part of traveling. But for the leisure, I don't have any doubt. We all rather prefer to be today in the Canary Islands than doing this Zoom thing.
Alexander?
Perhaps 3 remarks. First of all, we are pretty comfortable about the fact that the demand is there. You know, when you look at China, when travel restrictions were removed on the domestic market, the figures of the market are approaching the 219 figures. So it came back to normal almost immediately. So the appetite to fly is there. That's for sure. Secondly, what is blocking that is mainly, all the restrictions on travel, including quarantine. Perhaps I should have remind you of the figure. When there is a risk of quarantine, our surveys show that if there is a risk either at the destination or at the origin, the bookings drop by 100%. That is simple, 100%, zero bookings. For obvious reason, that's common sense, and nobody wants to spend, the vacations or the business trip in a very nice hotel, perhaps, or not so nice, in a quarantine period. So that's a point. So that's the reason why we are pushing to remove quarantine. Thirdly, the third remark is that we will probably see a quick recovery of the travel for personal motivation. When I say personal, it's tourism, it's visiting friends and relatives, all that stuff. For the business travel, we are a bit more worried for 2 reasons at least. First of all, companies have slashed their travel budget almost everywhere and significantly, almost by half. So that's a big impact. And secondly, the competition of all the virtual tools, like the one we are using today, are probably creating, less appetite for business travelers to take an aircraft. Even if, and frankly, it's not the case today, but we are all a bit fed up about all these virtual tools and not being able to view anyone around this table physically. I would like to meet you physically, ladies and gentlemen. That would be my pleasure. And I think I'm not totally alone in that feeling, and that's the reason why our industry exists. And I can tell you, when we had our General Assembly last week, virtually, it was very effective and efficient, but it was very sad, and not as effective as it was.
Well, I'm reminded, Alexander, of an old story from Ernest Hemingway, where a friend of his came up to him and said, "I have terrible news. I've lost all my money. I'm bankrupt." And Ernest Hemingway says, "Well, how did that happen?" And his friend responded, "Well, slowly and then suddenly." and I think what we're seeing here is the reverse in the world of travel and tourism, where it's about to become sudden with pent-up demand. And the leisure travel market, as you suggest, leading the way ahead of the business travel market. But I have to ask this question, since we're talking about health, we also have to talk about the health of the industry itself. Do you see more consolidations and failures before we get to that recovery?
Perhaps on that point, what is likely to happen in the short-term period is that the sector will see a fewer number of actors. As you mentioned, there are a lot who are already bankrupt, and it will probably continue in the coming months. So a fewer number of actors. Secondly, actors that will have shrunk their network because we are not able, to restart or to reopen all the routes we were operating before. So that's for the let's say, the coming months, perhaps 1 or 2 years. After, if the recovery is there, we will see either, you know, the existing actors growing again, and probably newcomers, because it's a lively industry. So that's the second point. The other element is that consolidation could happen. So the remaining actors buying, you know, those who are in trouble. But the point there are the two limits for that is, first of all, I'm not sure that even the remaining actors have the financial means to buy their neighbor, their competitor, or the other companies, and I'm sure they don't have, by the way, because they have to concentrate on their own existing business. And secondly, the fact that a lot of governments have a strong stake in, or have increased their stake in, usually in their national carrier or in the carriers under their responsibility. It's a limit to consolidation, because I do not see, you know, government having invested, you know, billions in the national carrier, you know, accepting that this carrier is sold to any other actor. It could happen, but I'm a bit doubtful.
So what you're saying is the pandemic might lead us to more nationalization of airlines?
Absolutely.
Probably, could be.
I'll take that as a yes. But Rita, you know, you talk about corridors and traveling. Right now, as an American, I can't come see you. All the EU countries tell me I can't go. But as the new health protocols and hygiene protocols are implemented and recognized, do you see the European Union standing strong as a unit, or do you see individual countries breaking off and saying, we'll cut our own deal and Americans can come, or we'll cut our own deal and Britons can come? What do you think?
Hopefully I'll see the future as being very cohesive as far as the European Union is concerned. We did have in the past some mistakes. We made some mistakes, I already told you, and one of them was in fact a couple of European countries trying to negotiate in a bilateral way with other countries, neighboring countries and not so neighboring. But I guess as for America is concerned, the old member states should stick together and should follow the EU recommendations. By the way, this morning I was reading the newspaper and I heard some rumors that the United States are thinking about the possibility to open a little bit the restrictions to Europe. And I guess that if the trend is that one, the future, let's see what Trump's administration says about that. But I guess that there is going to be a replica here in Europe. It does not make sense for the United States to take that step forward, and Europe will be, you know, behind. So answering to your question, I believe that European Union sticks together and be cohesion enough as far as United States are concerned, and not only the United States. By the way, last year we were growing. We had a kind of a growth of 20% as for the Americans when. 20% growth for American tourists visiting Portugal. And for instance, for Brazil, that's very important to us, very dear to us. We also had some very great metrics. As you said, at this point, you know, we do have a lot of restrictions, active restrictions, but we have to work in a very articulated way in order to avoid them and to cancel them in the future.
Of course, in the United States, our only island state, Hawaii, was essentially shut down for months and was very protective in terms of who they let in. You have the same situation in the Azores, don't you?
We do. In fact, it's pretty much like a Canary Islands. So in Azores and Madeira, because, you know, they have a kind of, they are islands, so they can control in a better way, let's say like that. So basically you have to have a PCR test or any other type of test valid. And as soon as you are considered to be negative for COVID, you can travel. And so I do believe that, you know, the islands, Canary Islands, Madeira and Azores, they really can be test beds for us, for the mainland countries, let's say, for the mainland region, they can be test pilots and they can be pioneers in order to introduce new testing routines and new testing procedures, and that's why we've been pretty much in pair in what has been done in Canary Islands. And Frederick was talking about, you know, the importance of, for instance, to bring German people and other people, other nationalities to Canary Islands, and we have been experiencing the same in Madeira and Açores, mainly in Madeira because of the weather, especially.
You know, we mentioned, you know, in terms of health protocols on airlines, you know, every airline that I know now will not let you board unless you're wearing a mask. In fact, if you refuse to wear a mask, you're banned from that airline, and the no-fly list is growing all the time. But as it applies to cruise ships, as it applies to airlines, the example that I'm going to use is one of your member airlines, Alexander, which is Qantas. Even though the airline really isn't flying any scheduled service now, it's already made an announcement that when it does resume service, no one will be allowed to fly unless they've been vaccinated. Is that a workable solution for you? And Javier, would you like to weigh in on that as well?
You know, for us, I think it's a bit premature to impose vaccination for at least two reasons. First of all, the vaccine is not there, and we have elements on the efficiency of the vaccine. It will be probably there in 2021, but the deployment phase is not absolutely certain. The way and the acceptance from population to be vaccinated, as Friedrich mentioned just before, is not totally obvious. In some countries, it's not totally easy. So what we say is, before asking for any mandatory vaccination, we will ask for mandatory testing, because this is a key issue. Again, it is a key issue if you want to maintain this bloody pandemic under control and reopen borders and travel again. Because there is something that everybody forgets. No travel, no economic growth, no economic recovery. Because you will never develop your business, sign a new contract, invest in a new project without a physical meeting with those with whom you are investing, working, developing your business. That is not true. So no growth. So in addition to the fact that it's nice to travel, that the leisure travel is wonderful, is a strong appetite for that. If we want an economic recovery, a strong one and a speed one, and we desperately need that everywhere in the world, we need travel to resume. All forms of travel, and particularly air travel.
Peter,
we need restrictions.
Yes, Friedrich.
Peter, might I, add on this, because it's said that business travel is proportional to economic growth, but leisure might not. I just want to emphasize one thing. I mean, when I look to the southern European countries right now, the major source of investment is tourism. Building infrastructure is tourism. When you look at Greece without tourism, it's like the overall year is minus 20%. If you take just the summer, it's minus 40%. Now, in Germany, we had a huge discussion if the pandemic would actually deteriorate the GDP with 8%, and everybody was afraid. Think about Greece without tourism, and I could even say also Spain. The southern European countries are a major destination. Portugal is the first, the first corridor we opened on the 15th of June was Portugal, as well as Mallorca, because it is essential for these countries. And the major investment, transfer of wealth, payment, and so on, and is actually salaries, jobs, is actually tourism. So it is, tourism is not nice only, it's a pleasure. Yes, it's good, but it's also essential for many, many, many of the destinations we are actually flying to. And, I talked about South Europe. I could have even made the point bigger if I had talked about North Africa. I mean, look at what's happening in Morocco right now, the most wealthy country in Africa, and what it does right now with refugees. But you could talk, we have big hotel companies in Egypt or Tunisia. And I mean, this is even more the case because you have less industrial activity, and the countries are beautiful. So I think, you know, leisure tourism is very important when you think about the European cohesion and prosperity in all regions of Europe.
So I guess that begs the obvious question. I have to say that Minister Huddleston had to leave for a prior appointment, but let me ask this to the panel as a group. How does everybody finally work together and speak the same language to implement the things that you need to have happen to generate the return that you want?
Well, if I may, Peter, I think that we are asking for a coordinated solution. We cannot rely upon 2,000 airlines to provide a coordinated solution. That's not going to work. We live in a highly regulated industry. We are very good at sticking to rules. Safety is in our DNA. We have proved that IATA recently proved that only 44 cases were confirmed when 1.2 billion passengers were flying. So we are good at that. I don't think that we are very good at writing the rules. I think that's for the governments. We need to collaborate. We need to feed them. We need to nurture and to provide them with data. But I think it's on the government side to actually provide with the joint protocols that we can follow. And I think that the only thing that we can do is continue with the testing, with the trials, and to try to, again, prove that flying with the right testing protocols is safe.
Rita, as a government representative, care to respond?
I agree with Javier. I think, you know, although I mentioned the importance of having a public-private partnership, I do believe that's the responsibility of the governments to define the rules. When there's a will, there's a way, right? So basically, the main challenge here is to identify the governments that have the same will. And I guess that we are some at this point. So, you know, Portugal can lead the way with Spain and other European countries. And if we identify those governments, and let's do it first. So let's identify, and then we can try to convince European Union as a whole for the 28 European countries to stick to a harmonized model that could really make a step further. And I think that's very important, not to stick in the same position. So all of us, you know, we have been discussing this for 1 hour now. All of us pretty much are aligned in what we want for the future, and we have to act. So let's try to give, you know, baby steps, more than baby steps, but at least baby steps, in order to make this a volatile situation, to make it evolve. And hopefully, again, because we are going to have the presidency, I guess that Portugal can really stand up and can really make a point here, because as it has been said before, for us, tourism is really an important activity, not only for Portugal, but for a couple of European countries, Southern European countries. So we'll have this chance in the upcoming months, 6 months, to speak up with a strong voice in order to move forward and to say what Javier is saying, you know, to define the rules, to identify the countries that are willing to stick to those rules, and I guess the private sector will follow all along for sure.
You know, it's one thing to say you're all aligned, and that's great, but now you have to get to a mutually agreeable definition of terms.
I know, Peter, and that's pretty much why I do believe that we are in a very, this is the right, you know, momentum. We cannot postpone anymore any decision. So all the governments have been putting some money into the ecosystem in order to guarantee that these tourism companies survive. We are trying to maintain jobs and so on and so forth, but we cannot keep up pushing without, there's a limit, resources are limited. So we have to move forward in order to lift the restrictions, instigate confidence, and allow that people start traveling again. testing, as has been said before, avoiding quarantine measures that really ban travel as a whole. And so we have to define those rules in a very pragmatical and assertive way. And again, up in the next 6 months, we'll have this window of opportunity, and we need to grasp the moment in order to pay forward, this willingness that we all have.
Well, Rita, thank you for that. And I also want to thank all of our panelists for participating today. Before you leave, we have one very important housekeeping chore. I've been asked by the organizers if we could just stay where we are for a second for a small group photo, a virtual group photo.
Right.
So if they will do that, we'll get that done. And so give me 1 second here. They'll let me know when they've got the photo. So everybody give us your best face. Our best aligned and taking action face. So I thank Minister Huddleston, who had to leave earlier, Javier, Friedrich, Rita, and Alexander. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'll be back for our second panel in a few minutes. But before I do that, I'm going to throw the floor over to a video message from the Minister of Tourism of Croatia. And again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, dear participants, I would like to greet you all from Croatia and also to thank Minister Reyes Maroto for inviting me to take part in this conference. Due to the COVID-19 crisis, international tourism is at the turning point, and it is obvious that we have to rethink its future shape. Even though we will have to wait for the global availability of COVID vaccination in order to return to the pre-pandemic figures in tourism, there are certainly some steps we can take to ease the international travel. In that context, allow me a few words on air travel. To my understanding, this year, tourists considered air travel a more risky form of transport than car travel. Therefore, it is important to reinforce the COVID safety procedures and the image of air travel as COVID-proof. This might be a key issue for numerous destinations in Europe and globally. For instance, in some regions of Croatia, we have had very low levels of infection during the summer season, but still recorded a serious decline due to the fact that those were really traditionally plain destinations. Talking about global health and hygiene protocols, Croatia has joined the World Travel and Tourism Council project dedicated to the international implementation and dissemination of global protocols for the so-called new normal. To participate in the project, we have prepared the necessary safety protocols and measures. We believe that aligning with the WTTC global protocols is an important step in securing and stabilizing not only the next season, but also an important step for the sustainable and smart future development of tourism. I would like to underline that international recognition of tests and the use of contact tracing technologies will make it possible for us to plan a sustainable and more resilient tourist future. To conclude, in 2021, we expect that the main condition for travel will be safety in the broadest sense of the word. And in Croatia, we will continue to improve our COVID safety measures to remain among the most desirable destinations. We will also focus on providing timely and dependable COVID-related information to travelers at the regional level. I would like to wrap up with the already well-known statement that a global problem asks for a global solution. Croatia is willing to do its part, participate in creating standards when it comes to health and security, which will make it possible for our industry to fully recover. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. We really appreciate that. And now it's time to start our second panel, which is appropriately titled, of course, COVID after tourism or tourism after COVID. Pick the one you like. But how the industry recovers, how it moves forward, and what steps need to be taken beyond just the medical and protocols that are applied in terms of hygiene and health. So let me first welcome our panel. Mr. Matthias Lemons, who's the Minister of Tourism and Sports of Argentina, Mr. Najib Balala, the Honorable Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife of Kenya, Greg O'Hara, the founding and managing partner of Certares, Mr. Federico Gonzalez Tejera, the President of the Radisson Hotel International Group, and Mr. Jean-Philippe Monod, the Senior Vice President of Expedia Group. I've asked each of our panelists to make a brief opening statement, sort of a situation report on where they see the recovery going, how we're going to get there, certainly in terms of how do you jumpstart travel and tourism again when it's so devastated, and then we'll go to my questions and an open conversation. So why don't we start with Minister Lamens?
Hi, good morning to all here in Argentina. Good afternoon in Europe. Well, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a difficult year for us and for all the world. And in that sense, I want to speak about what we are doing here in Argentina. Without a doubt, we are experiencing the greatest crisis in the history of tourism worldwide. These times have called the international community to action in order to sustain, rebuild, and innovate in the touristic sector. In this matter, I'm proud to say that Argentina has been no exception. In response, our ministry and national government have deployed the greatest investment in the history of tourism. First, we create specific plans for the tourism industry, such as the Rescue Fund for Tourism Operators, aimed at small operators who receive the sum of 50,000 pesos. Secondly, the Rescue and Training Fund for Tourism has meant the payment of minimum wages for small companies workers for 6 months under training in areas that would help develop themselves further in skills like safety, disability, and gender. Besides, as one of the most affected sectors of Argentina's economy, our national government support at the federal level about 20,000 companies and more than 210,000 workers. However, conscious that sustainability programs weren't enough, we developed what we like to think as one of the most innovative and creative solutions for any economic activity. The Previaje program that enables Argentines to receive a credit of 50% of what they spend in tourism in 2020 for 2021 travels in order to spend them in the sector. The program has been able to target various links in the chain of tourism, such as transport, accommodation, agencies, and gastronomy, among others. Up to this date, more than 300,000 Argentines have purchased their holidays with Previaje, which has resulted in over 5 billion pesos of billing for the tourism industry. These successful numbers result only after 1.5 months since the launch of the program that will keep working until the end of the year. With the recognition of the World Tourism Organization, we can hope for other countries to follow it as an example. As for the near future, we are proud and excited to share the news that as for this week, internal tourism in Argentina will restart and that we will have a summer season. We know that it will be different, that it would mean less trips and closer distances, and that we face various challenges in order to have tourism. Therefore, we have been working closely with the health ministry and local authorities to deploy more sanitary infrastructure and awareness in the midst of the pandemic. We have a unique opportunity to promote safe tourism with responsible protocols and behavior. We are confident that these circumstances will also help boost nature and proximity tourism, as well as working holidays as the industry's wheel starts to roll again. But last but not least, we have the imperative of thinking about the next challenges ahead in the long term. For us, it means continuing to develop international tourism and consolidate our position as regional leaders. In this context, we are reopening our borders for tourists coming from neighboring countries, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Chile. This market signifies the largest part of our received tourism market, and so far, the experience has been very successful. We are moving towards a gradual reopening of foreign tourism in our main destinations, knowing that the reactivation of global tourism is one of the biggest questions we face with the threat of a new COVID outbreak. After the most difficult year in our history, In Argentina, we have begun the reopening path with all the corresponding care and protocols that have been validated internationally by the Safe Travel Seals. We are certain that tourism will be a strategic sector for our economic reactivation and federal development. The prospect of a vaccine offers us an encouraging horizon. However, we, as tourism authorities, have the great challenge of rebuild what fear and doubt have deteriorated. Travelers' trust around the world. Thank you very much.
Minister Lamas, thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you with a few questions in a couple of minutes. I now turn the floor over to my friend Najim Bilala from Kenya.
Thank you very much, Peter, and I want to appreciate the invitation to this forum by Minister Maroto of Spain and the government of Spain. We are in a crisis that is unimaginable. This crisis was first started as a confusion. The 16th of March 2020 is historic. The world lockdown. The whole world went in a shutdown, and it was really, really pathetic. We didn't know where we were going, what was going to happen. We thought we were going to have 6 months and then it would be post-COVID. It's not post-COVID. And the earlier discussions, you can understand, despite this excitement and optimism on the vaccine, we are not going to be secure probably until end of 2021. And if we want to be back to normal, we need the whole world to have the vaccine, and people need to be vaccinated. Already you are told almost 30% of the people are cynical about it. There are always conspiracies about it. We don't know. Yeah, we definitely, things were tough. Tourism was being ignored before. It was just a simple economy. It's supposed to be for luxury. You can appreciate many governments did not invest heavily in tourism. It was the private sector that invested heavily in tourism. And then, yes, they reaped from tourism. It created jobs until it became 10% of the GDP. The global tourism is $8.9 trillion with 10.3% of the GDP, and millions of people have been employed there. 2020 was a sad year. Everything went down. Loss of lives and loss of livelihoods, and pushed people to poverty. Yes, what can we do? I think in the last 10 months, people tried to survive. The key issues we have done was to bring health protocols, wearing a mask, social distance, clean your hands, or with sanitizing. Those were the key issues that we all propagated. And we said, stay at home, you'll travel later. But then we could not stay at home longer than 3 months. Despite these protocols helped, we in Kenya propagated it everywhere. But definitely it's not the same. Then the government came in with stimulus packages and support to the economy. In Kenya, we got almost 53 billion shillings, which comes to almost $500 million to support to the economy, and another $200 million that were given earlier. So we had a VAT reduction, we have a tax reduction, we had stimulus packages. In the tourism industry alone, we managed to get almost $50 million injected directly. We managed to pay all the conservation or community wildlife rangers all over the country for the next 1 year salaries. And the next following year, 2021, we are also going to do the same. So we created jobs because people were losing jobs, because they were relying on tourism. And we come from a wildlife safari and nature tourism. We need to protect wildlife. Otherwise, we're going to destroy the heritage that we preserved all these years. So definitely, we had a challenge all over, but it's been tough. We are optimistic about the vaccine, but we know we are going to have this rough year to come till 2021. And how do we do it? We need truly a universal travel coordinated approach. Quarantine is killing business. We must come in an innovative way an alternative to quarantine. PCR is the guarantee to test negative, but it's taking too long and too expensive. What is the innovative way to solve the problem? These are realities. And then how do we sustain jobs for our people? Otherwise, some businesses will never open up again. And these are the challenges we have. But for me, I'm optimistic as well. Out of a crisis, we learned to have an opportunity. I think the future of tourism also is bright, but we need to remodel the sector. Health and safety should be number one to our clients. Hygiene is paramount. Number two is digital and technology. Nowadays, you've seen how technology and digital, including today, Zoom. I'm supposed to be in the Canary Islands. I'm here, but we are coordinating, all of us. Number three is the ecological approach. Climate change and environmental matters and carbon issues are real, and we need to address them head on. Tourism is a consuming or consumption sector. How do we make sure that we don't destroy by too much consumption? Number four, we need the people of Venice to feel that they're Venetians and they have space in their country. The people of Barcelona, the people of Amsterdam. Everywhere over tourism, we must address those issues, and local communities must be in the core of the decision-making of tourism, and also benefiting from the resources gained by tourism. And finally, it's about reimagining tourism again. Innovation will be key. Thank you, Peter. Those are my points for today. Thank you.
Great. Well, we got a lot more to cover, so stay with me, Najib. We'll be back to you. And now I turn the floor over to Greg O'Hara, the founder and managing partner of Certeris.
Okay, I'm outdoors here in Canary Islands. First of all, Peter, thanks a lot for getting up so early in the morning. I have no idea what time it is there, but I guarantee you're up the earliest.
It's 3:56 in the morning. Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. So I may have missed the mandate slide, but slightly, Peter, the opening question, but I focused on the things that we're seeing today and the things that we're predicting or prognosticating for the future. So the first thing I would say is, as Peter knows, we sit on the biggest data trove probably in the travel industry. We have a combination of credit card spending, actual bookings, and now with TripAdvisor added to our portfolio, a lot of intent and demand statistics. So most of this is math-based. So for those of you who have a better feeling for the travel industry than we do, you may have different outcomes going forward. But first of all, I think we're seeing potential impact on new tourism destinations. We're absolutely seeing a trend to rural destination, drive vacations, walking tours, bicycling. And that creates a huge opportunity for those of you on the phone who operate destinations for destination marketing and DMCs. Never before have those organizations been more important, and never before have those organizations been more underinvested in. For instance, Turkey this summer had 3 destinations in the top 10 of TripAdvisor's search criteria because it was open for business. It was allowing anyone in from anywhere, and Turkey had never gotten any destination into the top 50 before this summer. So we know that the demand and intent to travel places you can go with certainty is high. Secondly, we're seeing travel insurance balloon. It's up 170% versus the same period in 2019. We're seeing airlines providing unheard of traveler flexibility. We're seeing islands doing a good job. People like the Canary Islands, where I am today, or Grenada, Bahamas, Aruba, St. Bart's. All of those places have managed the pandemic very well, and travelers know that they can go there with certainty. We think that we agree with the previous panel that over time, quarantines need to get replaced with rapid testing. right? When I came to Spain, I signed on to an app. I generated a QR code that I could show on entry to the country. That means I had submitted my PCR test in advance of getting here, and I had filled out all the health and safety forms. So that was a great thing. So congratulations, Minister Reyes, for putting that together. Makes traveling very easy. We're going to see things like outdoor testing, for instance, to provide the traveling public a little bit more safety. Rather than doing the testing indoors, you can do the testing outdoors before they enter the building. There's all kinds of things. I'll skip a lot of those because I have a feeling Peter's going to ask more questions about that. We see a very slow return to the MICE business and the theme park business. And I've got a unique role, like I did in the financial crisis when I was the CIO at JP Morgan. I've got a unique role because we're the only large specialist that invests in the travel business. And our role over the next little while is going to be providing liquidity to companies who need it. Peter followed, and we've talked about this before. We provided liquidity packages to Azul, which is the domestic carrier in Brazil. We provided large DIP financing to allow LATAM airlines to emerge from bankruptcy, and we provided a interesting financial instrument to TripAdvisor to allow it to have liquidity for 3 years, no matter what happens. The other thing that we're doing is, as an investment firm, we're often focused on gains. And in this case, as investments come forward after the pandemic, I think we're going to have to replace investment returns or short-term gains with viability. We're very concerned that the industry remain viable, whether that through investment or merger acquisition. And finally, I had heard someone talk in the previous section, so I just wanted to mention this, of business travel. Well, the things that the people said about business travel were true. As we poll our customers, and we do about $50 billion of business travel sales every year, Peter, there aren't any offices to meet in. One of the things is if I want to come and I want to meet with anybody, in general, their office isn't open. So in addition to budget cuts, in addition to the other things that the gentleman said on the previous call, I think a return to work platform is going to be necessary before people go meet other people. When I have had business meetings, it's been in people's backyards. One was in a garage of someone's house. They're all kind of social distancing. But I do believe virtual tools will business travel going, others do. I think budgets will be open to meet it. So Peter, with that, I'll return it to you.
Well, lots of stuff I got to talk to you about following up. So stay with us, Greg, because we've got more coming. Let's go over to Jean-Philippe Monod from Expedia.
Thank you very much, Peter. I can echo a couple of words mentioned by Greg in terms of the trends, but let me first start with some insights of what we have been going through as a company. So Expedia Group, an online technology company facilitating travel, online travel agent with multiple brands. As you can imagine, March was a tough moment for everybody, including for us, especially with an enormous amount of cancellations, leading to an enormous outflow with no inflow of new bookings. Our bookings dropped in March between 85 and 90%. That picked up a little bit over the summertime. But overall, the year, as it looks now, we just presented our Q3 numbers with a decline of around 60% compared to 2019. So we had to go through quite a big change in the company, and so maybe covering a couple of points. So first, the company itself. So we of course had to deal with an enormous amount of cancellations, and that has triggered also innovation in the company. So I'm sort of building the bridge a little bit to the questions that may follow. So to give you an idea, we had 22 million cancellations in 10 weeks. So if you recalibrate that to an hour, that's 13,000 callers a minute. So that was an enormous pressure on the company, and of course we had to therefore invest a lot in automated solutions to help travelers, and that of course created some innovative solutions. But it was an enormous challenge in the beginning. We then went through a phase of also getting additional financing, and we look at the future, and we see light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still a bit of a dark couple of months probably to go through when we see demand pick up. Our figures show for searches that people are really looking at April and onwards. And that the trend is actually in APAC and LATAM to be earlier than that, and the rest to follow. But we've decided to look a lot about how can we make sure that we engage with the whole ecosystem. So firstly, we've worked with our suppliers by launching a recovery program where we provided our partners with marketing funds. That partners that have worked with us, we have created marketing funds for them, and some reductions in our commissions, but also taking a lot of time to make sure we share the insights that our data show. As Greg mentioned, data is really important to look at this pent-up demand, making sure you invest in the right moment, the limited resources that there are. So we've increased our insights for our partners. We've also worked on a marketing fund with governments, with tourism boards. We have a 25 million government marketing fund and a 250 million marketing fund with our partners. So total 275. We also enhanced our cooperation with the organizations like WTTC, and working very closely with them on the safety protocols, and working with UNWTO in partnership to create opportunities for the future, looking at pockets of growth, sharing data and insights, and working together in the coming months. So we see a future, but we see also some dark months ahead. But we do see that travelers are really wanting to travel, and I think our chairman has always said very clearly, when there is life, there is travel, and we truly believe in that. There's an enormous willingness of people to travel, and it is about these reducing the amount of quarantines, enhancing. I'm not repeating the whole previous panel, but sort of that is really important for our company, not to have these blunt instruments, but very specific instruments, travel corridors, lots more testing to allow us to get out of this difficult situation, which is of course going to start hopefully in Q1 of next year. Let me stop there and open to further questions. Thank you.
I will be back to you as well. Let me turn it over now to Federico Gonzalez Tejera of Radisson.
Yes, hello, Peter. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Minister Maroto, for the invitation. I would be extremely brief so we can go to questions as quick as possible. I would just keep 3 words that I think are the key words if we want to seriously attack the issue we have. And those words are safety, seamless travel, and sustainability. Safety is very clear, but we have been extremely slow in implementing the protocols. I think the work that the World Travel and Tourism Council has done is superb, and we are still, in many countries or in many destinations, those protocols are not in place. So that for me would be the #1 urgency, to make sure that those protocols are in place everywhere. The second one is seamless. The demand is there. What I think every consumer wants is to be enabled, by the public authorities and by the institutions to make sure that travel is easy and is seamless. And I think we should leverage all the technology and all the solutions that, for example, the World Travel and Tourism Council is putting together to make sure that when the demand comes back, the travel is really seamless, it's paperless, and all the information is there. And the third one that I believe is the biggest risk we have is sustainability. We talk many times about testing, that is indeed needed and I agree that the new protocols should have everywhere, okay, as much as possible, that the testing is before traveling, so I feel safe. But the second one is sustainability in terms of how is the health systems adapting to the new situations. Nowhere you can see as a consumer why I should not have fear if when I travel, I get infected in the destination. This is one key item that it seems we are forgetting. Of course, testing before traveling is critical, but the second one is, I wish, okay, that we would be able to make sure that we work not only with the tourism ministers, but also with the health ministers, okay, to make sure that the consumer knows how many more beds are being built in the public systems or in the private systems. So if I get sick once I am in destination, either I know how I will come back to my country, or I will know that I will get the attention that I would expect in my destination. We can make anything we want, but if we don't attack this third item, that is sustainability of the solutions from the health systems, anytime that a new virus will come, or anytime that a new may appear, all cancellations will come again. So this is, and just to finish, different to other crises. This is a crisis exclusively created by fear. Safety, seamless, and making it sustainable is the only way to remove the fear. And then I leave it there. Those are the three words I want to make sure that any minister or any institution gets clarity, okay? And I insist on, we have been too slow. I mean, we are 9 months already into the crisis, nearly a year, and we don't have yet common protocols, okay, across the world, or common travel, okay, testing protocols. And my fear is that actually we will forget the sustainability and we don't inform the consumers of how safe they should feel whenever they travel, wherever they want to travel.
Federico, thank you. And by the way, the issue that you raised is the one I'm about to raise. So we'll go right to that.
Okay.
And that is, we're talking about the lasting effects on international travel and tourism from COVID-19. And I'll bring up two words, and I throw this open to the entire panel: trust and fear. And by the way, this is in every aspect of the travel experience and every aspect of the travel transaction before you even have the travel experience. The two largest areas of complaints that I have received from thousands and thousands of travelers have to do with what you were talking about, Federico. They have to talk about insurance or assurance, and they have to talk about refunds and financial stability. In many cases, if you make a reservation, especially online, you cannot complete that transaction unless you either opt in or opt out of travel insurance. And with the best of intentions, millions of travelers did just that. They bought the travel insurance only to find out when COVID-19 hit that on page 95 of the insurance company policy page that nobody, of course, ever reads, it says you're not covered for pandemic. There are still billions of dollars out there waiting to be returned to travelers whose trips were canceled through no fault of their own. So you have a reluctance on the part of so many people now of why would I go somewhere if I'm not protected? And why would I go somewhere even if I'm not protected, I can't get my money back? So we'll talk about that. A number of countries, especially in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Costa Rica, I think Panama, have really embraced the concept of destination assurance. So I'd love everybody to talk about what they are doing within their own realm of influence to get to that point of destination assurance, to return that trust and to mitigate that fear. And if you want to start, Federico, I'll go with you.
Yes, I think actually we are looking, I think most of the operators we have moved to first implement, obviously, all the safety standards, and then second, try to rework with first giving consumers a lot of clarity on the different booking policies, okay, with return, not return, fixed price or variable price. And second, working with insurance companies that actually is one of the worlds that is changing the most, okay, I think during all this pandemic, okay, to try to make sure that those kind of events are covered, okay, in the future. Sometimes in some destinations we will get it, in some others we may not get it, but actually we're working proactively to make sure that that safety happens. But as I said before, beyond me knowing that when I book and when I travel I'm safe, I think one of the things that is going to change is consumers are going to look for much deeper information. Okay, I think the consumer is going to look not only for the conditions of my booking, but also, of course, the safety conditions of the hotels, that I think is good. And then they will look very much in detail to what is the safety conditions of the countries. I think we should not ignore. I don't live in Spain these days. I'm now in Paris, but usually I'm in Brussels or traveling when I used to travel around the world. That anytime someone reads and knew about a region or a country being locked down or having issues in the health system or not having enough beds, this is something that puts that destination off the charts for the coming months. I would not consider going to that destination because I don't know if I can go to a hospital and get the attention I need. Okay, that's why I said before that, as you said, booking is one thing, the stay in the hotel or in the place would be the other one. But I think the image of safety of each of the different countries or of the different regions is going to be a determining factor, okay, of if the consumers would decide for that destination or not. And sometimes I hear a lot about public and private collaboration. I think this should be the number one priority from the private and public collaboration. How are we going to increase the number of beds that exist in Canary Islands or exist in Baleares or exist in Madrid or in Barcelona or in Amsterdam? That is going to be a critical game or element, I think, in the image of safety and security of any travel destination.
Well, interesting you should mention that because I go back to an experience I had going to Panama about 6 years ago. And as I was going through immigration and customs, a gentleman stood up there and gave me a form, and I thought it was something I had to sign. It wasn't. It was a letter from the government saying, we just want to let you know that from the moment you're here in Panama until you leave, all of your medical insurance is covered, your hospitalization is covered if anything happens to you. Now, in countries like Costa Rica, they've gone one step beyond that, which speaks to your question, Federico, of number of beds. They've added medical evacuation and repatriation to that insurance coverage at a cost of only $10 a day for anybody coming into the country. I think that's a very good first step.
I think, and I fully agree on that. And I think, and I wish once we have all the ministers or many of the ministers of tourism, I would really suggest them that they don't forget that, because that's the image of real safety, okay, of really speaking true to the commitments of each of the countries. I fully agree.
Because in a way, it's not what people are talking about, it's what they're thinking about.
That's right.
And what they're thinking about is, I don't want to go somewhere and get stuck, or I don't want to go somewhere and get sick and I can't go home or I can't get treated.
That's right. That's right.
You know, it's interesting because I can think of few businesses that are as resilient in terms of their recovery other than travel and tourism. We go back to 9/11. We go back to the recession in 2008, 2009, even the volcano in Iceland in 2010, when people were asked in focus groups, and I think this is a quite interesting revelation. They were asked in focus groups, will you be traveling this year? And of course, the answer was no. They forgot on the focus groups to ask them the second question, which is what Greg was talking about. The second question was the easy one. They just forgot to ask it. Do you want to? And the answer was yes. They just needed, it wasn't a question of when they were going to travel, if or whether, it was a question of how.
That's right.
And so isn't it interesting now that we've been given an opportunity to sort of reset, a do-over, if you will. Najib and I would be talking maybe about over-tourism 9 months ago, but now we're talking about stimulating tourism. We're talking about managing that, but then it gets down to a definition of term, doesn't it, Najib, about how you manage it and deliver everything that Federico is talking about.
Well, this pandemic has taught us a lot. If you behaved well, people will build trust and will come back to you. You can see that a lot of companies also, when there was a lockdown, not the reason for passengers or clients to come into a destination, it was because the country was locked down. And some entities refused to refund or even defer to another year. This is insurance, so this is cancellation policies were disastrous. We as a government asked the associations to give us a list of people who have been difficult so we can blacklist them, because that destroys a destination. But we wanted the private sector to engage with their passengers so that they don't lose the loyalty of their passengers. So those are critical issues we need to address. But definitely we need to remove the fear into it. And my worry, yes, there's excitement about the vaccine, there's hope. If it reaches only to part of the world and not the rest of the world, then we are not safe yet, because the transmission and the spread of the virus will continue. So these are the issues that we need to be realistic about. Definitely, we have learned lessons. We need to do things differently. And yes, health protocols now are fundamental in the tourism sector. It's not just about clean and hygiene kitchens in our hotels or in our environment, only that. I think we need to go beyond that. That's what we have learned on my part.
What you're saying is that the traditional rating system of a hotel has to be thrown out.
Yeah, I think the rating system will change, particularly in hotels and particularly in the kitchen, what hygienes are being made. But what I liked most during this time, the coordination also within government. The Ministry of Health coordinating with Ministry of Transport, coordination with Ministry of Tourism. That coordination is not perfect, but at least it's working. Again, I would like to see the coordination between ICAO, IATA, SCI, all of them. Because without ICAO, without IATA, without the airport, without UNWTO, without WTTC, it's a problem. And I like the leadership that was given by UNWTO in bringing everybody together, so that we can be able to have universal standards or protocols. We can be able to share experiences and also give solutions. These are fundamentals. And sometimes you wonder, what happened if we did not coordinate together? It will be difficult, I can tell you that. Like now we are very clear. The revival of aviation is crucial for the revival of tourism. It's not either. It must be both. So the stimulus support that governments are giving is it has to be fast aviation and then the private sector in the tourism sector, so we can be able to sustain the jobs that are there. So yes, it's a challenge, and definitely a private sector needs to also be more vibrant in how they deal with their clients and how do they deal with their destinations as well. Thank you, Peter.
You know, it's interesting, both you and Federico brought up infrastructure, and that leads me back to Matthias in Argentina, and that is you've had the benefit, believe it or not, of the law of unintended consequences. You've been closed. You have an opportunity during this moment of closure to rebuild that infrastructure, to support what Federico was talking about in terms of the hospitals, the beds, the messaging to your people and to the people who want to travel to Argentina as to what they can expect when they come there. To what extent are you doing that in a realistic way? Matthias? Are you still with us?
Maybe Peter here, maybe Peter can come in. I think we need to recognize WTTC for bringing in the protocols. Because without guiding from WTTC and the protocols, I think we would have failed. And that uniformity of protocols and the safe travel stamps were crucial. The UNWTO for the coordinating between ICAO, WHO, as well as IATA, that was a crucial time. That leadership between WTTC and UNWTO was crucial at that time, and we need it to be continued as well.
Exactly. So I'll get back to Matthias when he can get back on with us. But let me shift over to Jean-Philippe, because we talk about, you know, we saw you had a tremendous drop in revenue, as did everybody. But the online agencies, the OTAs, had an interesting sort of revelation, I would suspect, because when the you-know-what hit the fan, it was no longer online that was required, it was a conversation. People were reaching out to talk to people. How did you quickly adapt to that? And then what lessons did you learn about the necessity for the conversation that you're now embracing moving forward now?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Indeed, difficult times create innovative solutions. You could say sometimes discussions take very long in companies. We could test things and look out what is the best way to implement something. But in these cases, we had to really move quickly, especially with the enormous amount of travelers that had bookings and needed cancellations or alternatives. and or repatriation. And so we have very quickly invested in building virtual agents. So speaking with machine learning, creating virtual agents that can assist travelers, or created automated, more simplistic automated solutions where we know what situation a traveler is in, and then on our website they can actually find their solution, cancel automatically through a couple of steps without having to speak to our agents. But indeed, in the beginning, it was an enormous challenge because our call centers were all over the world, and some of them actually had a knock on the door from the police telling them that they had to evacuate the building immediately. And so we saw in those March weeks, we saw our capacity drop enormously in various countries in the world, and that straining, of course, the other call centers. And we had to make these solutions. So I think we now have processes that can help travelers that want to cancel or rebook. We have also invested a lot of money in making sure we have the right information. So not only the teams at Expedia looking at all the different travel advisories that are changing every minute, but also the advice on the ground, what is closed, what is open. Trying to provide that information to consumers is of course a challenge, as you can imagine. I would the first thing I would love to sign up to is some organization that has put all the global travel advice and restrictions in one global database, and us all getting access to that in a trustworthy manner. And that's the problem. Information is changing so rapidly that the various websites that have been started, even by the European Commission, are already outdated the moment you look on them. So that's a difficulty, and we have implemented a lot of flexible solutions for travelers, so the flex refundable options, so that we can create the trust to book. But we do see challenges. Travelers have, on our data, it shows that travelers have shortened their booking windows. So most of the booking windows, most of the searches are for less than 21 days.
Yeah, in fact, Jean-Philippe, not only have you shortened the booking window, airlines have shortened the publishing of their own schedules. Right. They can't keep up. They're changing rapidly. But going back to something you just said, it's not about just rebooking and canceling. It's also about the confidence to book in the first place now.
Absolutely. So we have invested a lot in working with WTTC to create these protocols together with all the actors in the industry. I know Radisson has been very active in that as well. And we have then made sure to promote those to our partners, making sure that they highlight them on our websites and mark them. And we would then promote those protocols visibly to the travelers to hope to create the trust that they know where they're going. That hotel has invested a lot in a safe solution, but it is all about the trust, getting that information, the flexibility of the booking, and the trust that once you arrive, that suddenly not the travel advice changes and you have to go back again, and that constantly changing regulation.
Do you envision a time, Jean-Philippe, in the not too distant future that the front page of your website, when I go onto it, will give me a health rating or a safety rating of a country as opposed to just a rating for the hotel?
Well, we have a page that provides you the information of the assessment of the government itself. So you can, there's a general COVID page where you can then link off to the different pages that the governments have created about their situation, where the most the infections, casualties also, and the advice. But we cannot give more than that. The government is still the one that gives the advice, and we can only make sure that information is visible.
I guess the question for all the panelists is, when was the last time you trusted the government to give advice? The reason why I'm asking that is, shouldn't there be an independent ratings agency here to give people the trust that they need and the confidence that they need to travel again?
I would love that. And the European Commission, just to talk about one part of the world, I'm based in Brussels, so I'm very close to what happens here. The European Commission is very much trying to get governments to agree to a common approach of risk, a map that has the same colors. But this is a very tough point, and we would strongly support that approach. But it is a very delicate matter because a lot of countries want to take their own decisions, and that's exactly what we would like to change. Sorry.
I think, Peter, maybe the words safety or health is very difficult to measure. You know, there are many components. But I agree. It's not that I'm volunteering, but I think actually WTTC and United Nations, WTO, maybe should look to publish what are facts. Okay, what is the number of beds available? What is the number of intensive care beds available by country? And actually, I think that information, I know as a fact today, is being searched in many countries. And actually, something as easy as foreigners' help. Okay, when we talk about international travel, the language is one key barrier. Okay, I mean, if I would go to Spain, and I use Spain because obviously they are hosting, and I'm Spanish, but I would love to have, you know, a foreigner's number that I can call and speak in any language if I'm sick or whatever. So I think these kind of things will be more and more needed, okay, in the future. And I think we will follow up with Gloria, okay, but I think it would be a great idea that any of these institutions that have done so well to coordinate and unify an approach to solve the issues the same way they are doing with seamless travel, okay, that we can eventually incorporate facts, okay, that have no judgment, but that then the consumers could go to a place where they can see actually what are the facts about that country. I think that would be very, very useful.
Peter, maybe I want to agree with you that we need an independent organization to actually say who is safe, who is not safe. Currently, the current travel advisory, particularly for Africa, is totally not acceptable. It's totally destructive to our economies. It is too rigid and never changes. It's a stigma rather than anything else. And I want to agree with Federico here. I think it is WTTC and UNWTO to put the facts right. So don't take sides, just tell us how many hospitals are available. How much is available? And government can volunteer in giving that information, but get somebody to verify, as simple as that. You know, I want to say thank you very much because the safe travel stamp was designed by you. That's what Gloria told me. So that was a great inspiration, and it worked very well. It brought motivated countries to do extra to safety for their tourists. Thank you.
I can't agree with you more, Najib, when it comes to travel advisories. For years, the United States State Department has issued what they call travel advisories. It was not done in an equal way, with an equal emphasis. It sent the wrong message. And now, as Federico talks about, when we're living in this environment of fear and mistrust, it only makes matters worse. And about 3 years ago, the U.S. State Department reorganized their State Department advisories so that there's now a State Department advisory for every country. But it's done on a 4-tier level, as you know, which is even making matters even more complicated. Because level 1 says, travel with normal caution. I have no idea what that means. Level 2 now says travel with increased caution. Most people at this point are boarding up their windows. Level 3 says reconsider travel. And at this point, people are digging a hole. And level 4 is do not travel. And it's painting with such a broad brush that people just see those words and they just don't go. And I guarantee you, I mean, look, I was in Nairobi at the shootout at the shopping mall. I was there, all right? I was covering that. And you and I both know that 8 blocks away, life was normal and life went on. So, and yet you suffered because of that. And so the same thing happens in an epidemiological perspective where people are afraid of something that they can't even see. They need better information than a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 advisory. So maybe that's something that WTTC and the WTO or the UNWTO can work on a universal level.
A good thing, Peter, is Ebola. Ebola happened in West Africa. South Africa and Kenya suffered had because of the perception of where is Africa, where is Kenya, where is South Africa, and we suffered. And probably West Africa is closer to Spain than to Kenya. And that is the irony of it. And we suffer, our economy suffer, because of the travel advisories are not right. And sometimes they're used politically.
I hear you. Greg, you talked about some changes in traveler behavior. Certainly, you certainly recognize the pent-up demand, but I think I've seen some radical changes in traveler behavior, and maybe it's a lasting effect and not just a short-term effect, where we go from working from the office to working from home to working from anywhere. How has that changed the landscape and how you look at where you're investing your money in terms of how travel is going to grow?
So before I do that, Peter, if I can just revisit I didn't want to step into anybody else's conversation. If I can just revisit a couple things. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is why, when travelers went to get refunds, they weren't given refunds, right? And that's, most travel companies use deposits as a working capital facility. And when people want their money back, the working capital facility unwinds. So companies that did a good job out of this, Expedia did an excellent job, right? It faced a huge working capital unwind, went out and got financing. Booking.com did the same thing. American Express did the same thing. But to Najib's comment before, for smaller businesses, those facilities aren't available, right? And so people like me have to be able to work with people like Najib and provide hundreds of millions of dollars that end up in smaller businesses across Africa and other places, because it's not that they don't want to. They understand the destruction to their brand. Expedia, Booking, Amex, we can afford to do those things. Smaller businesses can't. That working capital, those deposits are tied up. Expedia I'm not invested in Expedia, but Expedia did a particularly good job at Jean-Philippe, Expedia did a particularly good job at getting out of this. They did a great job with robots, right? One of the things is we have tens of thousands of people offline across a lot of our businesses, so we didn't really notice the difference. Expedia had to react really fast to get those people online. And then one thing, Jean-Philippe, that you said, we built a public website at Amex that all of the world can use, that actually sucks in all of the global travel advice. I'll get the URL and send that to you. And it's available to Visa customers, MasterCard customers, Amex customers, whoever it might be. We have something that has an API and goes out and basically uses old tech screen scraping to scrape off of all the government's websites as they post them. So if you're interested in that at all, we have that there. The problem, Peter, and then I'll get to this in a minute, since I have so many government people, the problem is the way those regulations are actually written. Right. So, for instance, I'm a Canadian citizen, right, who lives in the U.S. as a green card holder. Canadian citizens are allowed to go to Europe, right, if they want to. U.S. citizens are not. And it's not clear the way the docs and regs are written as to whether or not when I arrive, my Canadian passport or my U.S. residency trumps. And you'd be surprised how many people are in similar positions. So although, Jean-Philippe, we've got all the information sucked down, the interpretation of that is often left to the person who's sitting at the border, right? It reminds me of the first Trump tax code in 2016, when they wrote it down on the back of a napkin. They got it through Congress and no one really knew what it meant. It took 2 years to figure out what the interpretation of that meant. But finally, what we're seeing is you're seeing all of to answer your question, we're seeing all of these changes in the way things are done. I think Jean-Philippe said that, APAC and LATAM return before everybody else, and that looks like it's previous to April. We're seeing that same data. So we're putting capital to work there that's shorter term rather than longer term. Things that are in the MICE business or the theme park business or something like that, those are 3-4 year horizons. We even think business travel has we're underwriting kind of a 75 to 80% recovery in business travel only by 2023. That would be apocalyptic in any other year. If it goes down by 2, 3, 4%, that's a huge thing. And we're saying it'll still be down 20 in 2023. We have a lot of different themes. There's a lot of tech themes that go on. A lot of businesses need services and SaaS services to technologically enable some of the things they want to do, even COVID check-in, even record keeping. I know you spend some time in New York, but if you go to a New York restaurant, for instance, you have to give them kind of name, rank, and serial number now before you sit down so they can do contact tracing. I have no idea how they're going to do it or what they're going to do with that information, but they're certainly collecting a lot of information on people. So we're trying to use a lot of the data we have to make better decisions to see where people are spending their time and money and where they want to go. One of the things that we haven't talked about is intent. There's kind of a subtle difference between intent and demand. And so using things like TripAdvisor, Expedia, Amex data, those kinds of things, to figure out what people intend to do allows us to apply capital to those things that they intend to do them. Sorry for the soliloquy there.
No, I love it. Well, then let me expand on that for a second. We have seen, and I agree with you, that whatever return happens now will be led by the leisure market, I think, for at least in the short term. But as that happens, I'm starting to see changes in traveler behavior. Instead of picking a place as a vacation destination, they're picking it as a lifestyle choice.
So I agree with that. We saw that happen before the pandemic. People decide that they want to go kite surfing. Now, they decide on the activity first, and then they decide on the destination second. And what's interesting is the brand has moved to third place, right? So they say, I want to go kite surfing. I'm going to go to Tarifa, right? And then they decide, okay, where do I want to stay when I get there? If you think 20 years ago, someone would say, I want to go to a Four Seasons, right? Or I want to go to a Radisson, and I want to go, okay, where do I go? Then I'm going to go stay in Hawaii. And the way travelers are getting that information tends to be, there's a lot of people that are surfing reviews. You know, the average traveler, even online, I think looks at 7 sources of information before they make an online booking. A cruise, when someone books a cruise, the average number of phone calls to a cruise travel agent is 11, right? So there's a lot of people doing a lot of work. That number is starting to go up. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people are spending a lot of time doing a lot of research on the thing they want to do, and that activity tends to be illness, right? That people want to do, and they're trying to do those things in places that they can right now drive to. The flight is short, you know, even though all the data points to almost no COVID transmission on flights, right? People are afraid to fly and get on planes because they're sealed tubes. That's the way they view them. And so a lot of that information has to be passed to the traveling public, but I think you're going to keep seeing people make decisions based on what they want to do. Then they'll decide where they want to go. Then they'll decide, you know, how to get there and where they're going to stay.
Or one step further, where they want to go and stay there as a long-term decision. Meaning, yeah, you're seeing those long-term visas happen right now, right? You know, Barbados came out with an interesting program recently, and a bunch of other people where you can go and for a couple $100 you can stay there for a year on a visa and work remotely from there. I don't know how much certainty there is in someone doing that. I don't know how many people have been told you can move to the Barbados for a year until you have to come back to the office. Certainly that is not the case at my company. We have not told anyone they can go to the Barbados. And I know Jean-Philippe's chairman is not a favor of having half the people in Expedia move to the Barbados. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who are in a situation that they can go to the Barbados and work from there. And I'm sure they will. Well, given that the change in behavior that you have noticed that may seem to be long-term, how has that changed your investment strategy as to where you're going to put those dollars in the long term? Listen, in every crisis, there's an industry at the center of it, right? So in 2008, 2009, everyone knew banking was at the center of the industry, the center of the crisis. And it was very easy to figure out which companies were going to make it through the crisis. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, right? It was very easy to figure out which companies were not going to make it through the crisis. Washington Mutual, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, right? The same is true in travel. In this crisis, travel and hospitality are at the center of the crisis, right? You know, I can tell you that I have a great deal of confidence. I keep using Expedia as an example only because I think it's one of the better run companies in the travel business. Expedia is going to make it through the crisis,
right? So it's safe. It's kind of safe to invest in Expedia. You're basically playing a return to normalization of demand in Expedia. And I would venture to say, Jean-Philippe can't say this because it's a forward-looking statement, but I'll bet you if Expedia gets to the same place on demand in a year or so, it'll be a much more profitable company because of this crisis. And so what we're looking for is to figure out who can make it through. That's the first filter. The second filter is where can we combine companies to make them bigger and provide scale. For instance, Spain has a ton of great travel companies, but none of them are big like the German companies or the American companies, right? They just don't have the scale that other places have. So if we can combine businesses inside of a backing with an investment, we're looking to do that. And finally, a lot of companies borrowed too much money prior to the crisis. They weren't expecting this kind of situation. And so we have a debt fund that goes out and buys up the debt so we can work with management teams on a friendly basis and restructure the company. Instead of them having to deal with banks, they can deal with travel experts. So those are the three areas, the thematic areas that we're chasing.
Is Matthias still with us? I hope he is.
I didn't see him come back, Peter. I got a message that he was off.
Let me go back to Federico for a second and then ask you this. When you talk about what Greg was talking about the problem getting refunds, the problem of transparency, what is the private sector doing moving forward to assure the public that if their trip is canceled through no fault of their own, if their flight is canceled, if their tour operator cancels the trip, that they can not get a voucher or not essentially do an interest-free loan to the operator, get their money back? As an assurance to let them know they can go in the first place.
Right. I think we are working on two work streams. One is the insurance companies. How can you get sure that those monies can be refunded? That's one. And second is also when you have a big or a large franchise operation segment like we have, for example, in the US or we have in India, that takes much longer. Okay, so I think we are trying to look in the franchise contracts, in the franchise systems. How do we secure? Now, going back to the point that was raised before. Actually, in many of the occasions where I have seen issues, it's funny because one of the good things of the new media is everybody is very easily reachable. So I can tell you, I have got in my LinkedIn profile nearly, I wouldn't say 80% of the complaints, but many of the issues that at the end in a given moment have been raised. And I'm talking to you about a hotel in India, okay, where a family has booked and even if the policy of the company would say that they were entitled to refund, maybe the hotel owner didn't warranty because he had a cash issue. So I think one of the good things is the best we can do, I think, is be as open as possible as a company and as transparent as possible. And I can tell you, I have got many direct emails to me saying, we have an issue, this is the issue, have talked to our operator. We don't know who the issue is, but actually we have the issue. And then we have discussed, it may have happened with a booking with Expedia, it may have happened with a booking direct with us, it may have happened with a direct to the hotel. So I think it's transparency and being public as much as possible, okay? Together with the insurance companies and the clarity on the franchise contracts of what are the penalties that the owners would have if they don't comply with what has been agreed that is the policy.
And being proactive moving forward.
That's right.
Najib, I speak to you today from California, one of 50 of the United States. I can tell you with assurance, we are not united at all. We are 50 fractured states. Everybody's doing their own thing. You are speaking to me today from one of 54 countries in Africa. So I go back to the beginning of the pandemic and wanted to figure out who was leading. You had the president of Madagascar who insisted he had an herbal health remedy. In Guinea, the president insisted the treatment should be hot water and menthol. At one point, even the governor of Nairobi was handing out small bottles of Hennessy. He called them throat sanitizers, right? But and then
wait, course, so Peter, come on, that works. That works, right?
Yes, and Greg is speaking from experience, so thank you, Greg. And then,
I'm Irish Catholic. It works for me. I got to tell you.
Absolutely. And then you have the president of Tanzania who did not close houses of worship because he said the only healing for the COVID virus could happen there. So the question that is for you in Kenya, who is leading and who's speaking for Africa? Who is leading the way to get through all this and to set the standards for moving forward?
Well, I want to say at least in the name you have United States of Africa, you have the United States of America. You should be united. We don't have United States of Africa. We have only the continent of Africa. So we are yet to be united. We are looking forward to the African Union leadership. But definitely every country took its own protocols and guidance from WHO. And yes, WHO recognizes the ones who did not follow. Again, it's their own mistakes. And I can tell you, tourism will come back, also will reflect of what have you done during the pandemic. What have you invested in the health sector? How much have you invested in the health sector? For example, if I want to call investors, the first thing now they want to know is how many hospitals do I have? How many ICUs do I have? Do I have enough ventilators? These are the things that are being taken seriously by investors and by tourists. So if you ignored it and you said, God help us all, it's fine. You'll pay for the consequences. Definitely also here it brings division because it's how come in Tanzania is not as strict as Kenya? But those are theories and things that we can't talk about them now. We want just to think what is right for Kenya. And we follow the world as well. We share with the international community what's going on to Kenya and what we are learning from other parts of the world. So we are careful. And because also we have a very open democratic system that is embedded in our culture. The right to ask questions, the right to access information, the right for people to know. That is a culture we have in Kenya. We can't hide information. We must brief. We have a daily brief by the government on the numbers every day. And it must be evidence-based. So these are the things that maybe they're not the same cultures in different parts of Africa or our neighbors, but we decided just to do what is right and to get guidance by science, not by emotions or politics.
Peter, and if I may, we have some hotels in Kenya, and we know it's true. And I think investors know the different approach. I mean, Radisson today is the #2 hotel company in Africa, and we know exactly very well which are the countries that have taken this serious and the different measures by country. And I think all investors know. To the point we mentioned before, I believe, unfortunately, not many people know. And I think that's why I insist that it's critical to have facts around the world, because many people will be very surprised, but actually all the work that has been done in Kenya, that we have seen in the hotels ourselves, with the different security measures and with the different health system activities. But I think it's worth to really explain to the world and share with the world all those things, because I agree, Africa is not one. I mean, Europe is not one either, but Africa is maybe a bit more unknown. But I think investors know very clearly what the different countries in Africa and hotel owners or operators, we know very well which country has taken this seriously and how serious they have been.
Well, Federico and Najib, it also gets down to basic messaging, doesn't it? It's how you get that message out. I remember not that many months ago, you had 2 or 3 different officials from the WHO saying 2 or 3 different things on the same day. And who did you go for information from? And yet they were supposedly the governing body of that sort of information. So I would hope that one of the lessons learned from this is how governments and the private sector can work together and at least address one organization with one voice to not only put the information together, but then get it out. And to that extent, Najib, back to you, what's the one lesson that you learned over the last 9 months that you've been able to apply moving forward? The biggest lesson?
A coordination between the private sector and government, that is key. Sharing of information and an open door policy of both government and private sector. Because if we don't have an open door policy, you can't engage and you can't learn from each other. Because this is a crisis that is unknown before. But also you build strength, you coordinate your industry better. And that's exactly what I have done in the last 10 months.
And Greg, do you foresee a situation from a consumer perspective where we come back to that big bad 6-letter word called escrow, where when somebody puts up money for a trip, there's some independent third party in escrow holding that money that's then released when the trip happens?
It's super easy. There's lots of regimes, Canada and Australia being two of them, that require travel companies to sequester money in separate accounts. You don't even need a third-party escrow company. UK does a good job making you post to the CAA. It depends on the country and it depends on where it is. It also depends on the type of thing you're buying, right? But I think the travel companies have to strengthen their balance sheets going forward to prepare for this. You know, I think people are thinking this is the one and the only. We haven't talked about virus mutation. We haven't talked about, is it like the flu where you have to get vaccinated every year, but you only get vaccinated for last year's flu. You don't get vaccinated for the flu that's going around. And so I think you're going to see travel companies bolster their balance sheets. One of the nice things is, as long as the Fed and the EU keep interest rates at astronomically low levels, like, people forget, you know, the after the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, the Fed kept interest rates low for 7 years, like at kind of the 1% level. And that lets people put their money into risk-weighted assets. If you put your money into risk-weighted assets, what's the riskiest thing you can possibly imagine right now? Probably the travel business, right? In terms of you know it's going to return, you just don't know when. And so I think you're going to find a lot of people allocating resources to the sector. For instance, Peter, I think you may know this. We raised more money in our funds since March. So March to November, more money's come in to invest in the travel business than the previous 12 years I was in business. Like that's amazing, right? That people are allocating those kinds of funds. We've gone from a relatively small shop in March to a big one. You know, we're not big like Blackstone or KKR. Again, jump leap yet, but we're trying. We're directionally going in that direction. So we're traveling the world trying to figure out what governments need. We did a project in Turkey that you know about. We did a project in Japan that you know about this summer, and we'll keep trying to figure out where we can apply capital and where governments can be specific with us. We'll apply capital to those places.
But that flow of money is messaging in and of itself. It's a message to the rest of the world that confidence is going to return to travel if everybody behaves.
Yeah. So one of the problems is we all use travel as a homogenous term, right? We say travel will return, and everyone can find an element of the travel industry that they're uncertain about, right? Whether it's the meetings and events business or theme parks, it's actually a really heterogeneous industry. There's plenty of examples, not enough, right? Where companies that were in the travel business are doing better in 2020 than they were in 2019. Right? There's not enough of them, but there are lots and lots of examples where travel companies have taken off. And I think that going forward, you know, we're going to have to figure out where those applications are, right, and where they're not. But I think it's important for us as an industry to so, for instance, Najib's got some of the best. You know, I've been to Kenya myself several times. We've taken family vacations there. We've done all kinds of stuff. He's got some of the best things to go see in the entire world. Right? But who's going to go see there? When are they going to go see them? How are they going to go see them? And how does a small safari camp operator stay in business, pay their employees, make sure the communities in which they're part of are all taken care of if they don't have access to that capital? And so it's hard for us, for instance, to apply to those to businesses because they're small. Right? They're little. It's easy for us to go to somebody like, you know, Expedia or Booking and say, okay, what do you need? And that's an easy thing to do because it's one stop to deploy a lot of capital. So we're happy to do those things if we can work with governments and they can be specific.
I gotcha. Well, it's important messaging, and Najib, in your situation, that's where the government comes in to try to help the small businesses because otherwise they fail.
Yes. What we did is that in the conservation sector, we managed to pay salaries for all the rangers. So we have paid salary for the next 1 year of 3,600 rangers on community land. This is not national parks, this community land, so that we can ask the community, yes, still go ahead and protect wildlife. We also allocated $3 billion or $30 million for small hoteliers to refurbish, or people in the tourism industry. How do they refurbish? And with a low interest rate. Here, interest rates in the banks is about 14%. This is 5% interest rate. So it's low interest rate and a 10-year repayment plan, 2-year moratorium and 8 years repayment plan. So we're going to support this SMEs. But definitely, again, I think we need the volume, we need business back, we need more injection to the stimulus packages. It's not going to be enough. Also, government, remember, they don't have revenues because most of government were depending on tourism. Our economy depends 10% of the GDP is tourism. So yes, we are suffering all over. But I agree with Greg here. Some sectors have really boomed. Manufacturing, for example, we used to import all PPEs and masks from China. Today, we are a net exporter of PPEs. So we export in the region. So we don't need to import anything from China or anywhere. We can afford to do them locally in Kenya.
Well, the bottom line is everybody's got to get the messaging out, number one. Number two, you've got to get government involved. Number three, it's not just about getting your infrastructure back. It's widespread, reliable, rapid response testing that's universally accepted. Plus, the big bad, the elephant in the room that we haven't really talked about today in length is airlift. You've got to get the airlift back. And once that happens, then hotels will do better, your tour operators will do better, food gets put on the table, the economy grows, and tourism continues. I'm afraid we're out of time, but before we go out of time, just one housekeeping chore, which we did in the last session. I beg your indulgence on this one. The organizers have asked us for a group photo. So if you just stay right where you are and smile and look at the best dressed minister in the world, that's Najib, by the way. He always amazes me with his choice of ties, always wows. So just one more second for the photo. Thank you for that. Najib, thank you so much. Matthias, I'm sorry we lost you. Greg O'Hara, as always, Jean-Philippe and Federico, thank you all for joining us in this panel. I now return it to Minister Maroto.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Peter. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much indeed for your moderation. It was a very great job. Muchas gracias por la moderación de los paneles. Has hecho un excelente trabajo y muchas gracias a los panelistas también. A continuación, nos acompañan en la mesa la ministra de Industria, Comercio y Turismo, doña Reyes Maroto Higuera, el secretario general de la Organización Mundial de Turismo, el señor Zurab Polilikashvili, la consejera de Turismo del Gobierno de Canarias, doña Yaiza Castilla, y Gloria Guevara, presidente y consejera delegada del Consejo Mundial de Viajes y Turismo. A continuación, Gloria, si te parece, puedes iniciar tu intervención. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. No sé si me permitan abrir mi video. Si no, no pasa nada, pero está controlado. Can I open the video, please? Thank you. Muchísimas gracias. ¿Sí me escuchan bien? Ha sido un placer poder participar. Una vez más quisiera agradecer a la ministra Reyes Maroto, al presidente Sánchez por unirnos en este evento tan importante. Para el WTTC fue un honor poder colaborar, participar, organizar y sobre todo ser parte de este evento histórico. Hoy se habló de muchos temas muy relevantes acerca de las pruebas tan importantes, este protocolo internacional que es fundamental que lo ejecutemos y que nos pongamos de acuerdo, sobre todo los gobiernos, como ya se ha venido mencionando por todos los participantes. Peter inició su conversación hablando de los 174 millones de empleos que para fin de este año van a estar impactados, por lo cual es primordial, fundamental, esta coordinación de todos. Y si me permiten, quisiera cambiar un poco al inglés por el resto de los participantes para hacer un resumen breve, y yo estoy seguro que la ministra y Surab agregarán a lo que yo voy a cubrir. Thank you very much to all the participants. This has been an amazing day, an amazing session. Thank you, Peter, for a wonderful job moderating. As always, you have been fantastic. It is very clear that we need to have an international testing protocol. It is crucial. That was said by Alexander Jonial from IATA, Javier from Iberia, of course, Fritz from TUI, and everyone talk about the type of test that we need to have, an antigen test, rapid, low cost, so that we can include it in that protocol. Nigel from the UK government, the minister, mentioned their progress made, also the test and release, that WTTC was part of that effort, and I thank him for that leadership as well. Rita from Portugal shared her experience and also how much they have done regarding the same, the international collaboration and the testing. We also heard from the different participants of how much still needs to be done, especially to save the winter season. This was something that TUI highlighted, and Iberia because of Canary Islands, very important. Of course, IATA mentioned restarting aviation very quick, implement the ICAO guidelines, which is something that we have been working with ICAO, IATA, and ACI for a long time. And Iberia talk about the importance of working together. I think in summary, everyone has been talking about that we need to learn to coexist with this virus, and the quarantines are not good. It was also mentioned the digital agenda, sustainability a top priority. Federico was great from Radisson when he mentioned the safe, seamless, and sustainability, and we need to maintain that and move forward. Information available with the facts, that was very clear and loud from Greg, from Certares, Jean-Paul from Expedia. They talk about how do we provide that information to the travelers, very important. And of course, Balada also mentioned about Africa and the challenges that they are facing and the wonderful job that they have done in Kenya, but also that Africa is not one, that there are multiple challenges in the countries, and we see that in Europe and in the US. And Matias from Argentina shared with us what they have done in domestic tourism to boost that and to reopen the barriers. Overall, has been a fantastic session, and as I say at the beginning and the opening, international collaboration is key, and this historic event is allowing us to move in that direction. So, una vez más, quiero agradecer al Gobierno de España por el excelente liderazgo, porque esto es exactamente lo que necesitamos, trabajar en conjunto, público y private sector, o el sector privado y público de la mano, para salir adelante y recuperar los millones de empleos que han sido afectados. Y solamente trabajando en conjunto, como ya se solicitó ahí, la petición de que el WTTC y la OMT, por ejemplo, trabajemos de la mano en este dashboard, en esta medición de países por parte del WTTC, con mucho gusto, cuenten con nosotros, esperemos que OMT también esté de acuerdo, y muchísimas otras cosas más podemos hacer, pero es fundamental que trabajemos para recuperar el sector y sobre todo reactivar los viajes internacionales y los vuelos, como dijo Peter y mencionaron todos. Muchísimas gracias, ministra, una vez más. Muchísimas gracias al Gobierno de España. Thank you, everyone, for the participation and for a fantastic session today.
Muchas gracias, presidenta. A continuación intervendrá doña Yaiza Castilla, consejera de Turismo del Gobierno de Canarias. Yaiza, puedes intervenir cuando quieras. Gracias.
Bueno, en primer lugar, quisiera darle las gracias a la apuesta en particular de la ministra Reyes Maroto y a todo el Gobierno de España Central por apostar por el destino Islas Canarias y en particular por la isla de La Palma para organizar este foro de alto nivel político, económico y social en un sector tan importante como es el turístico, que nada más y nada menos que alberga este foro, todos los que están presentes aquí de forma presencial o virtual, más del 90% del Producto Interior Bruto mundial. Esto es muy importante, con lo cual que enormemente agradecidos porque nos sitúa otra vez en esa posición de salida Agradecida nuevamente también porque en los distintos paneles se ha hablado de Canarias también como un referente en todo el protocolo y en toda la estrategia a seguir hacia adelante, que podemos impulsar también la marca España en este sentido y también ser de ayuda al resto de países del mundo. Y porque consideramos también de otra manera que es importante la colaboración público-privada. Aquí se ha dicho muchas veces en los distintos foros a los que hemos podido pues atender y prestar atención, con lo cual que también por parte del Gobierno de Canarias cuenten con esa estrategia, porque es la que hemos seguido, es la que consideramos que realmente también se tiene que seguir para todos tener un objetivo común, eficaz y eficiente. Y en este sentido agradecer muchísimo a todos los intervinientes sus referencias a Canarias, porque también sus palabras llegan a nivel mundial y nos ayudan como destino turístico. Como saben, Canarias es un destino turístico líder. El hecho de celebrar aquí este encuentro lo refrenda, con lo cual que triplemente agradecida. Pero también es un destino que ha proyectado una imagen de destino responsable y seguro a lo largo de esta pandemia. No solo por la contención de sus cifras durante todo este tiempo, sino también por aquel remoto caso inicial en La Gomera, que nadie pudo pensar en la evolución de todo esto, y luego también por ese gran caso del Hotel del Sur de Tenerife, que afortunadamente se pudo gestionar de forma responsable y por lo tanto se han ido luego también tomando distintas decisiones a lo largo de todo este tiempo y estrategias en torno a esa seguridad, de garantizar la seguridad máxima posible para todos los visitantes, para también los residentes canarios, y por tanto esto nos ha dado una gran visibilidad y ha demostrado que la relevancia de Canarias en el escenario turístico internacional es muy buena y por tanto tenemos que seguir en ese camino. Hemos sido y seguiremos siendo muy perseverantes en la estrategia que nos marcamos desde el minuto número 1. Prácticamente no hemos variado nuestra hoja de ruta, a pesar de los confinamientos que hemos tenido en algunos países y que por tanto escapan de nuestras capacidades de control, está claro. Una hoja de ruta que pasaba y pasa por garantizar, como dije, tanto a visitantes como a trabajadores del sector, como al resto de residentes, unas condiciones de máxima seguridad y que sean compatibles con el disfrute vacacional para reactivar, sin lugar a dudas, la industria de la felicidad en la que Canarias es excelente. Por eso tenemos grandes expectativas en el gran paso, en esa ansiada armonización que también han pedido todos los intervinientes en los distintos paneles que hoy hemos tenido, de medidas coordinadas a nivel mundial que permitan garantizar esa movilidad, esa confianza en los movimientos de personas entre países y reactivar la industria turística, la industria de la felicidad, cuyo peso económico es trascendental. No lo voy a poner de relieve otra vez porque aquí ya lo he puesto de más que manifiesto, y es muy importante que de una vez por todas se haga esa debida armonización para reactivar todas las economías del mundo, porque tiene que ir de la mano el control de la pandemia. Aprovechar la ocasión por el reconocimiento que han hecho todos los intervinientes en relación al destino Canarias, porque estamos en un momento decisivo hoy y mañana para Canarias. Estamos en un momento en el que necesitamos, en el que estamos en un punto clave donde tenemos que comunicar a todos los operadores turísticos la necesidad, esa importancia de poder implementar a todas aquellas personas que puedan venir a Canarias, pues esas pruebas más accesibles y más asequibles, tal y como dijo al comienzo de la conferencia el presidente Sánchez. Estamos en ese momento crítico pero muy decisivo para el archipiélago y esperemos desde luego que poder darles noticias estos días muy positivas y esperanzadoras que ayuden a reactivar el destino que ustedes también tanto nos han ayudado a mantener en este liderazgo mundial. De nuevo, muchísimas gracias a todos por intervenir. Gracias, ministra, por hacernos partícipes de esta conferencia y por ponernos en el nivel que nos has puesto también. Y sin lugar a dudas, muchísimas gracias también al Cabildo de La Palma, a su presidente y a todos los organizadores del evento, que ha sido maravilloso y muy fructífero. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, consejera de Industria, Turismo y Comercio del Gobierno de Canarias. A continuación intervendrá el secretario general de la Organización Mundial de Turismo, el señor Zurab Pololikashvili.
Gracias, Eduardo. En primer lugar, first of all, I want to welcome the Minister from Mauritius, who especially came for this event. Thank you, Minister, to be with us, with your delegation. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. This meeting was planned and it was initiated by Minister to attract and to make the first presidential meeting, but unfortunately, because of many restrictions, it was mentioned today, we could not make it, but it's really a very successful and very important day for all of us, for industry, as I mentioned. I will start from the a little bit earlier period, and this story started on Canary Island. This is the continuation, what we started in July, when the European Union first officially announced that we can travel, and Canary Island was the place where we came with Minister, and special thanks, Yaisa, to you, to insist us to be here from very beginning, and the message was to restart tourism, as I mentioned this morning. And from beginning, and from that time, we were talking about the I-cards, we were talking about tests, we were talking about the special protocol, by the way, was invented by Canary government and State Secretary for Canarias and Minister for Spain. And starting from there, we were promoting these measures. So thanks to God that all these measures are reality today. Many countries started to use PCR tests, and I'm sure that it will continue because, again, harmonized protocols, coordination, these are the talks we started from the March. I thank to my dear brother Najib, who was very humble today, but he was and still is chairing our Executive Council, and he was chairing the Crisis Committee where we had 7 excellent meetings. This is also our Crisis Committee, I think. We are talking about measures we have to all decide together, and the next visit will be in Portugal. I am really looking forward to collaborate with Portuguese government during next 6 months. Why? Because European Union will be and is always example for the rest of the world. We need to talk more with China. We need to talk more with the United States. We need to more with Middle East. These are Russia. These are main markets for tourism industry, and we can't leave them behind of European Union borders. We've been twice in Brussels to advocate all member states, countries like Egypt, Turkey. I don't want to forget some of our member states, but we have to be more united, and we have to look more beyond of European Union, and it was mentioned today. I think all these actions, United States, it was mentioned several times today. We presented just 2 months ago a very nice showcase, Fiumicino Airport, promoted, and there was a first flight from Italy to New York. So these are the steps, and these are nice showcases well to use. We heard a very positive and optimistic approach from Minister from United Kingdom. United Kingdom is another main source and main market for the industry, and we are very optimistic and very glad to have him closer than ever. Unfortunately, United Kingdom is not a member state of our organization. I hope very soon they will become, and it was really a positive message from him. And again, the quarantine is becoming from 14 days to 5, then will be 1. I'm sure that all these measures and all this period we are learning a lot about this virus will facilitate our travels. So to sum up, let's start traveling. I'm traveling, I'm coming from Brazil, the most infected country in the world. I have my friend from United States, another leader of coronavirus issues, but travel is possible. We are here with a safe and responsible way, as we mentioned. There is less risk at the plane, and there is less risk in the hotel to be affected, by the way, and let's promote it. If we don't do it, believe me that no one will follow us, and it will be impossible to restart tourism. So the declaration, which is another step to restart tourism, is here. I want to thank especially to my dear minister from Spain, His Excellency Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, and we were committed at the last Fitur to make Spain and Madrid new Davos of tourism, and we will do it, I'm sure. Unfortunately, COVID could not give us possibility to make it real, but we need more coordination, and we more to be closer to each other. Many thanks to WTTC. Gloria, Maribel, Greg again for your active participation, because again, private sector and governments, they've never been so close like we are today, and we will continue the leadership we started. The first day of pandemic was announced when I was sitting in front of General Director of World Health Organization. So we have to be closer, we have to be together, more united, and we will have results. And tourism will start, I'm sure in it. And thank you again to be part of this big family which is tourism.
Muchas gracias, secretario general. Y para concluir, tiene la palabra doña Reyes Maroto Hilera, ministra de Industria, Comercio y Turismo del Gobierno de España. Ministra, cuando quieras.
Pues muchísimas gracias. Y en primer lugar me gustaría agradecer la hospitalidad de las autoridades de esta maravillosa isla, de La Palma y de las Islas Canarias. Sin duda, poder celebrar aquí esta conferencia internacional y a pesar de tener en la distancia a muchos de los países y CEOs de las principales empresas a las que os hemos sentido muy cerca. Así que muchísimas gracias a la Organización Mundial del Turismo, querido Zurat, por ayudarnos a preparar esta conferencia, al Consejo Mundial de Viajes y Turismo, querida Gloria, también por tu liderazgo y sin duda, como decía Yaisa, una reunión muy fructífera y sobre todo una cumbre que ha reunido a los principales líderes del turismo mundial, más de 95 países y más de 100 empresas turísticas de todo el mundo. La extraordinaria importancia que tiene esta cumbre es que por primera vez representantes del turismo a nivel mundial, tanto del sector público como del sector privado, nos comprometemos a trabajar juntos en la reactivación del turismo, que sin duda es una prioridad en estos momentos. Como ha dicho el presidente del Gobierno de España, los resultados de esta cumbre redundarán en el beneficio de millones de familias y de empresas en todo el mundo. Sin duda, la prioridad, decía en estos momentos, es la reactivación del turismo internacional, hacer posible el reinicio de los viajes internacionales seguros y por ello hemos recogido una serie de recomendaciones en la declaración de La Palma que me gustaría brevemente compartir con ustedes. La primera es la adopción de protocolos internacionales para las pruebas COVID-19 previas a la salida y la aceptación de los resultados a la llegada al destino en la forma en la que algunos países y algunas regiones ya lo han implementado, como es el caso de España o las Islas Canarias que hoy nos acogen. Sin duda, el establecimiento de medidas de control sanitario de esta naturaleza permitirán no solo reducir los periodos de cuarentena, a la vuelta a los países de origen, sino incluso eliminarlos por completo. La segunda de las recomendaciones que recoge la Declaración de La Palma es establecer acuerdos internacionales para implementar corredores de viajes internacionales para facilitar los viajes de turismo y negocios entre países y ciudades con situaciones epidemiológicas similares. En este ámbito, sin duda, España ha sido pionero en establecer estos corredores turísticos. En estos momentos ya tenemos con las Islas Canarias y con las Islas Baleares estos protocolos y sin duda ello está permitiendo reiniciar los viajes internacionales de una manera segura. La tercera recomendación invita a las empresas a proponer nuevas opciones para adaptarse y facilitar los viajes en un contexto de pandemia. Opciones que incluyen ofrecer flexibilidad para las reservas, términos de pago o cambios como consecuencia de los casos positivos de COVID, pero también productos asequibles o de mayor valor añadido para incentivar los viajes nacionales e internacionales. Y por último, la declaración insta a todas las partes, como decía, a países y a empresas, a promover una industria más inclusiva y resiliente, reforzando los programas de capacitación de nuestros trabajadores, nuevos modelos de negocio y producto, prácticas de sostenibilidad en el turismo. Sin duda, el futuro sin COVID está cada vez más cerca, gracias a la disponibilidad a partir del año 2021 de vacunas. Y este encuentro es una situación inmejorable para compartir ideas sobre el futuro del turismo post-COVID. España va a hacer un gran esfuerzo inversor en los próximos 3 años, movilizando más de 3.400 millones de euros para modernizar nuestro sector turístico con una prioridad, y es que España siga siendo el país más competitivo del mundo en términos turísticos. Es el momento de reforzar la cooperación internacional y la cooperación público-privada y trabajar juntos para convertir esta crisis en una oportunidad y que el turismo siga siendo un pilar clave de nuestras economías y de nuestro bienestar. España en esta cumbre se compromete a liderar la recuperación del turismo internacional, a trabajar conjuntamente con los países, con el sector privado, a través de la Organización Mundial del Turismo y de la WTTC para el reinicio de viajes internacionales seguros y para recuperar los millones de puestos de trabajo que están en riesgo como consecuencia de esta pandemia. Esperamos haber contribuido a un debate fructífero que sin duda sienta las bases de un compromiso compartido por todos los que hoy hemos participado, como digo, líderes mundiales del turismo que hoy se comprometen con la recuperación del turismo, más de 95 países, más de 100 empresas de todo el mundo, que hoy en La Palma, en Canarias, damos un paso para que muy pronto el reinicio de los viajes internacionales seguros y la recuperación esté en todas nuestras agendas y posibiliten recuperar, como decía la consejera de Turismo, esa industria de la felicidad. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, ministra. Muchas gracias a todos aquellos que habéis participado a distancia. Muchas gracias a la delegación del Gobierno de Canarias, al Cabildo de La Palma y al Gobierno de Canarias, una tierra que trabaja para la reactivación del turismo internacional y que ya ha demostrado con los hechos que se puede viajar. Sin más, damos clausura a esta conferencia para la recuperación del turismo internacional. Gracias.